Right, we're back for another episode of Shut Up and Scale. For this one, I will just go right at the beginning and tell you, remember, there is something called Last Free Nation Premium, which you can subscribe to at lastfreenation.com. It costs $9 a month. If you get it for the whole year, it's actually $7.50 because you get a deal. It's just $90 for the whole year. One of the things you can get, which is what we're about to do, is you can submit your own take to Shut Up and Scale. And each week we pick one fan take and one of us drops our opportunity to do a take. Don't worry, we do it like in a democratic fashion. And if someone had a straight fire take, we sometimes would do it that way. It's not like a strict order. So not only do you get to submit a topic, if you do that, if you go ahead, you'll have special Discord access and you'll see the channels where you can do that. But at the end of the show, we will also even do an exclusive Q&A for like 15-20 minutes that will be behind the paywall for people who subscribed, which also are actually fan submitted questions. And if you are already a subscriber, I would say for that one, there's actually not that many get submitted each week. So some weeks there might not be a Q&A, but if you would like there to be one, go to the special questions thread on the Discord for all subscribers and just put in there the name of the show. Say it's for Shut Up and Scale, and then put whatever your question is. You've actually got a pretty good chance at the moment, as long as it's not something silly, of actually being a question that we use. As long as it's something interesting, you might end up featured on the show. So we're going to start with the fan take, which means it was an interesting one. So the fan take for this episode is from Adam20, and it just says, the world's format sucks. What are some of the best matchups that we never got to see? So his point is, he's not even asking, how do we fix it? What he's saying is, since he contends that the format sucks, what matchups that could have happened at any time in history were we robbed of because of the format? So fun one here.
Okay. So yeah, and I'm glad that it doesn't ask us to go into the nitty gritty of how do you get these results every time, because in some ways, even with a perfect format, you miss some results unless you have because that'll be the nature of it. One thing which actually sprang to mind was, over the years we've seen really little NA versus EU. I know that often we kind of spring to saying, well, okay, these are the best teams that never got to fight each other, and we'll get to that. We will, because there are some great matchups which we never got to see at the top end. But actually, my first instinct was like, what would have happened if we'd seen like way more NA versus EU over time? There are plenty of teams over time which I think we could have seen in best of 5 fashion, particularly as well, because we saw some best of 1s. Like, I mean, it was really interesting seeing Alliance versus Cloud9 at Worlds 2014. And that was really interesting. But what would happen if we had like a best of 5 between what I would consider the two similar teams of like Alliance and TSM in 2014? Or if you go to, say, 2016 or maybe 2017 would be more interesting in terms of like EU versus NA, because G2 were better in 2017. But like G2 2017 versus an NA team in 2017. Are there any NA versus EU matchups that sprung to your guys' minds as well?
Yeah, so I have 2. I like how this guy automatically starts with the world's format sucks. Because obviously we had a talk about formats a couple of weeks ago, and I was defending the world's. I said, like, I think the world's format is good. So what do I think actually sucks about the world's format? To me, the thing that really, really sucks about the world's format is how groups were decided. Especially in the early days, you never got balanced groups. So I actually have two NA versus EU games. The first is 2016, which is TSM versus. No, sorry, that's the wrong one. TL, from 2020, TL versus Fnatic.
This was Double Lift TL, right? So 2019, obviously they did well MSI, continue on to 2020. So this is Double Lift TL.
No, wait a minute. Because 2020 was when he left and went to TSM after spring. So what year are you talking about?
Sorry, because that was the 06. Sorry,
you're killing me right now. Do you mean season 9 by any chance?
Yes.
No, I was,
No. Wait, what?
Give me a break.
Yeah.
Who's in the team? Who's in the team? Give us a sense.
No, the double lift. I mean double lift.
Against which Fnatic though? Who's the mid laner of Fnatic? What are you looking at right now?
I'm reminding myself sorry, I looked at.
Surely you know the team that you want to see him against. So which mid laner would you like to have seen him against?
I would like to see him against
Nemesis.
Yes, against Nemesis.
Right, so it's 2019, yeah? Yeah, 2019. So it's the TL that made the MSI final against the Nemesis Fnatic, yeah? That's what you want to say.
Fnatic,
okay. Why do you want to see that matchup?
Because I think that Fnatic would have lost it. And I think that Fnatic... basically, I think that Fnatic... A lot of the time, people say the EU got quite a soft draw in 2019, but they always say it against my team Splice, right? So I feel like Fnatic also got quite a soft draw, and I think that it would have been interesting at least to see Fnatic to see Fnatic against TL that year specifically. So, or even RNG versus TL, because of course we forget in that year that was one of the groups where you had like two kind of super, on paper, what was super groups, right? Which was you had the SKT Fnatic RNG group. So any of the RNG versus any of the teams that made it out from some of the other groups, and you had the Damwon Invictus Team Liquid group, where people said that Team Liquid were very unfortunate, and people said that RNG were basically very unfortunate, right? So those are our 2 of the years where I think it would have been interesting to see. But since we were talking about NA versus EU, that's the specific one. It's TL versus Fnatic. How would they have done that year?
Yeah, because I think the year after that, things changed quite a lot. So my apologies for breaking in when you were at the start of that, Peter, because I think I threw a spanner into the works then. Because basically in 2020, TL lost Doublelift and they got Tactical, but they also got Broxer. So Broxer was on TL in 2020, so things changed quite a lot. Then Fnatic had Self-Made over Broxer himself, because Broxer was still there in 2019. But obviously the 2020 Team Liquid was kind of like, that was a real what-if roster. And that's why I'm like, look, this question could very easily lend itself to what would, JDG23 play against them. We'll get onto that at some point as well. Who would they play against in some other parts of the bracket, or maybe another team of that caliber? But actually, I think there are a lot of promising teams which got kept down by groups format. That's actually a fair call. And actually, I'm going to go one step further in this too. I actually think one thing would be really interesting for one period of time. And, all of us would have been around for this, where there was a period of time where NA was like, oh, NA sucks, but Cloud9 are great international. What would have happened if we'd actually saw Cloud9 versus an NA team at international as well? Like Cloud9 versus TSM in 2015 to 2017, sometime in that era when they were clearly losing to like a TSM in that period of time too. So weirdly, while you might talk about the top teams, I'm actually really interested in what would happen with some of these what-if teams from NA and EU over time.
I mean, the thing is that a lot of the time, there was a long period of time where the number one NA seed basically got fucked every single time they went to Worlds because of the way that the seeding was weighted. It was actually, if you wanted to do better at Worlds, it was better to be the number 3 seed from NA than the number 1 seed. Because if you got the number 1 seed from NA, you were basically guaranteed to have as your number 3 seed and your number 2 seed like a Chinese and a Korean team. Because you had to have like a Chinese and Korean team in groups, and the way that it worked, essentially, your weaker team would be like one of the top 8 teams at the tournament, but ranked as like a 9 to 12, right? You could have like the 5th best team at the tournament being a rank 3, a 3rd seed.
Yeah, so if you were 2nd or 3rd seed, you might get EU or like APAC 1st seed. That was the logic.
Exactly, right? Like the goal would be to get like Flash Wolves basically as your number 1 seed, and then you couldn't get a Korean or Chinese seed because they wouldn't be in pot 4. So you had the highest chance to avoid having both a Korean and a Chinese team in your group. But the number 1 team basically was really, because of how the seeding was working, you would often get fucked, right? So there's a lot of, I have what ifs, but my what ifs are basically NA versus non-EU teams, but 2019 is the one. Also, I would have loved to see 2019 Splice versus TL, because I think we would have beaten TL in 2019. But NA fans always say, Splice got into the quarterfinals because they had the softest draw. We wanted TL because we thought we matched up really, really well against TL that year. So we wanted to be in TL's group. So that would have been fun as well. But it would have been it would definitely have been, for me, NA versus EU would have been TL against Fnatic or TL versus Splice for the EU series.
Here's the thing, I'm not really that fussed about the Western matchups, because the problem with those ones is those aren't the biggest elite League of Legends. Those are more just hype matchups, and obviously it would be fun, yes, to see fan bases like Fnatic, TSM battle against each other, because they're just so obnoxious, aren't they? Like, either way, it's going to be drama. I just meant more, put it this way, if you notice, I do try to keep really to what I think is the actual, thinking of the question. So in this particular case, when he says the format sucks, what you've done basically, Peter, is just pick fantasy matchups you would have liked to have seen. But the problem is, I don't know that the format is what stopped them. For example, did Fnatic make TSM unable to get out of groups? I don't really know, or a Team Liquid. In that case, it's kind of their fault. It wasn't really that the format shit, they just lost games. To me, I took it more as, for example, I'll give you an example if I was to do this in sports. In sports, the matchups that torture me aren't the ones where, that would have been great, but we just didn't get it. It's more if you know how, for example, American sports, where they have the 2 conferences, it's where 2 teams teams make it to like the conference finals. So if they each win one game, they'd meet in like the Super Bowl or the NBA finals, and then they never do. So for example, in basketball, people don't know, Kobe and LeBron never faced each other in the finals, even though they were in different conferences. They got to the conference finals a bunch of times in a row, but one made it, and then when the other one made it, the other one didn't, and then you never got it. So it was a rookie faker thing. But put it this way, I can't really blame the Worlds format for not giving me rookie versus faker, because if you don't know, majority of the time rookie didn't even qualify for Worlds. That's based on things with his teammates. I don't blame the format for that. Actually, if you don't know, regionals was even a pretty good format. He just didn't get through. So I can't blame Riot for that. So I take it more like, you'll see from my examples, ones where either if you'd have had double a limb, I think these teams just would have rematched or met at some point in the lower bracket something, or I've picked ones that just like Worlds itself, it was 2 semi-finals. So I'll give you the obvious example. We've discussed it in the past. The match I always look back and say, man, I wish I'd got that, because I got denied it twice in 1 year, is at 2019 Worlds, IG versus G2. It should have been the MSI final. It could have been the Worlds final. And if you ever look back, bearing in mind, G2 can stake a claim that year, maybe we were the best team. The team, I think we all wanted them to meet, since they had this weird actual, the joke was, their like creative brawling style worked really well against T1 and Korean macro teams. But as we all saw in group stage games, the dream always was to have a Chinese team who basically invented that style, battle them, and IG were the ultimate. We also have all the stud players. That would have just been an amazing, I feel like an amazing, I don't even know who would win it, by the way, but it would just be an incredible matchup, and it's historic players. So there's an example of one I wish we'd have had. Mainly the other ones, I had a similar one along similar vein, which is at Season 2 Worlds 2012. I actually do think Taipei Assassins ruined the tournament. Now, I can't be mad at them. They won the tournament. Like, they're supposed to do that. But if we'd have just had M5 win that game, Moscow 5 versus Frost, we got that matchup with different rosters. Then, it was the same roster with different team names the next year, right, as Azubu, IM Katowice. But if that had happened at Worlds, people don't know how monumental that would have been, right? Remember, the Koreans didn't come to Europe. They went to NA, or you went to Korea, and Moscow 5 didn't go to Korea. They stayed in Russia. So that was the matchup of what basically was what we thought was the best team, Moscow 5, against, at the time, you could have made the case, Frost were the second best team. They'd beaten CLG, they'd won the Georgia. So there's another one, the 2 semi-finalists, where if you could have had that matchup, I think it would have just been historic and epic. My other ones are mainly more, after that though, it's more ones where I'm like you, either I'd need double limb to work its magic, or I just need these teams to face each other like Peter. So 2 other ones I had down was, obviously, I would have loved to have seen, I actually think the JDG 2023 one, the dream there was that they just played Chovy's Gen G, wasn't it? That was the style matchup we never ever got, did we? Because think about it, that already you have some of the sort of control style of Gen G, and at the time JDG had the ultimate team fight. I always thought that would be an amazing matchup. And then along similar lines, I also went for, I always thought at 2022 Worlds, that would have been the perfect time to have top esports in Gen G. That would be when Knight and Chovy were both coming online as like super mega. They were both on contenders too. That was the one where, like, I mean, Gen G fucked up the bracket, and TS didn't even get out their group because of the round robin, didn't they? So again, these are more like I did the fantasy set. So you pick whichever ones you want. I've gone with like a mixture of strict ones. I threw a few others. Okay. So I open it up. It doesn't have to be an AU. What else would you go for?
So I've because I know sometimes it's about the format, sometimes it's not, and obviously the spirit of the question is about format. For me, like, I am actually going to bring back one, which is perhaps one you ruled out there in terms of 2014. I am actually going to go down to the regional format where KT Arrows should have been at 2014 Worlds. They weren't. They won summer. But the thing is that, like, in any other year, winning a summer split gets you to Worlds.
Yeah,
and I think that we were robbed the entire year of KT Arrows versus Samsung White. They didn't play at all regionally in that year. They played against Samsung Blue, but they never played against Samsung White. Would have loved to see that. Obviously, like SKT T1K at that point, they didn't deserve to make it to Worlds at that point. So that one, I'm not going to delve into that one. The KT Arrows, I would have taken them versus anyone at 2014 Worlds just to see, okay, what would have happened if they were against a faster, less controlled team than Samsung Blue, who they actually had a good matchup into. Could they actually beat Samsung White on a high pressure match in a best of 5? 2014 Worlds, that would have been fucking incredible. And it could have been, the even like higher peak to Rookie's crazy start of his career. Players like Kakao, what would have happened to him if he like went placed well at a world championship / won a world championship? What would have happened there? A whole bunch of players on that team, which I think could have really had such a different story. And while it was very, very cool seeing the Samsung teams there, that 2014 Worlds was just missing a KT-shaped hole. So that's one which I'd throw in there immediately, but I won't like put too many in. But Peter, you got anything?
I've got a couple. So first is from going for 2019. I feel like we didn't see enough T1 versus Chinese teams in 2019 because G2 kept beating T1.
No, that's fair.
Yeah. So I feel like the matchup that I've always regretted not seeing is FPX versus T1.
Oh, definitely.
From 2019, or just like more Chinese teams versus T1, you know, like any Chinese IG versus T1, you know, I'd have taken that as
but isn't one reason why that one's especially interesting is because now it would be like the ultimate captain shot caller matchup of Doinby versus Faker, isn't that like people joke that Chovy versus Faker is the chess match. No, Doinby versus Faker at that time would be the Ronaldo versus Messi looking over the chessboard meme, wouldn't it? That would be an amazing match. I wouldn't want to watch that.
Yeah, exactly. I think there have been many times where JDG have not played Gen G.
Oh, definitely.
Like basically, like I can. Which world should I pick? You know, one of the worlds where they didn't play.
Well, 23 would be the big one because they didn't even play at MSI either. No, that was the real. That was the real cock block the entire year. Like they played against BLG and they lost to BLG. Yeah. Cool, that's whatever. But like transitive properties doesn't work like that. We wanted to see the goddamn matchup.
Yeah.
I mean, I think 2023 is the dream. 2022, I would have taken 2022 as well. I think. Because they were on different sides. Yeah. So we didn't get that. Other things. Okay, so first, 2016. I feel like EDG were quite weak coming out of groups that year. And I think it would have been interesting to see them against Flash Wolves. And I think it would have been interesting to see them against TSM in 2016. Both teams that had actually kind of hard groups. To be honest, Flash Wolves had IMA in their group and somehow managed to lose twice to IMA to not get out of groups. If they beaten IMA twice, they would have gotten out of groups.
Might go amazing, Jay.
Yeah. Oh my god. How could Sword Art and Caster and Maple lose to this guy? I couldn't believe IMA were at Worlds, let alone the fact that they went 2-0 against Flash Wolves. Like, oh my god. So I would have liked to see Flash Wolves against EDG. If I can't have that Flash Wolves against EDG, I'll take TSM, who got a group of death in 2016. It kind of sucked for them. The only other one...
I've got one. Here's the thing. I actually agree on that Worlds, but here's the obvious one I would do pick here. You want NA versus EU? TSM 2016 was one of their best teams ever. I want them against H2K. Let me see Forgiven, shit-talking Forgiven against TSM Pride of NA. Mate, the fucking banter in that game would be unbelievable, I can tell you. Forgiven would play like he was going to die if he lost the game. That would be an unbelievable match.
That would have been insane, actually. Because remember, that's the year where obviously HGK made semis, right? In 2016, they made it semis through Albus Nox Luna. And there's always been like a bit of a question mark. If they'd made it through NA, I think that just the shit talk around it would carry. No one would care. No one would care, after that point.
I mean, I think the tragic thing, I've talked about this before in the show, so I'm not going to do it again. But of course, Albus Nox Luna's, it was Licrit who was their support. But their support, who was their main shot caller, lost his voice after the groups. So that's why they were so shit in the quarterfinals. He couldn't talk at all. He couldn't talk at all in that quarterfinals, and so they completely collapsed. They were better than that. It's not just random wildcard team lost to H2K. Ha ha. It's that literally they couldn't play the game because their shot caller couldn't talk. So there's that one. The other one I have is like 2013 Gambit versus like Royal or like OMG or like, because so what happened in 2013 is Gambit had to play Najin Black Sword, right? Yeah. And they ended up losing a really close series, best of 3 series. Wasn't even a best of 5. I'll give me a best of 5 of that. And that was all. That was all we saw from them in like best of 3s. Right? I would have liked to see them in best of 5s, and I would have liked to see them best of 5s against Chinese teams. Heck, I would have loved to see them in a best of 5 versus SKT T1K, but they'd have probably lost that, right? So I would have liked to see them against RNG or OMG. Give me OMG, because they were a bit more controlled in those days, and OMG were like really fucking crazy. And OMG are what fans think Chinese teams are.
Yeah, definitely.
In 2013.
Hey, did you say OMG were more controlled?
No. I said Gambit.
Oh, sorry. I thought I misheard. I was like, dear Lord, what is he saying? So good. I'm glad that was my mistake.
Yeah. So I think OMG are what fans think Chinese teams are. But I don't actually think Royal were like super balls to the wall aggression. But yeah,
they were really good team fighters was the big thing for them.
Yeah,
really good
like
team fighters.
I just doing the last 2 weeks, I just feel nostalgic. I feel like I didn't see enough Gambit. Like Gambit against Prime Gambit against more teams. Give me more. But yeah, it's their fault that they lost to Type A Assassins, and it's their fault that they lost to.
But one thing you're making a point of that, I'll tell you what, I will remix and I'll do an NA versus EU, because you're right. Yeah. The other area of the format sucked is that BO3, same worlds. Oh my God, let's take the Fnatic Cloud9 series and just have it be a BO5. Then we don't have all that stupid shit. They said you just ban casting. You don't only say that in a BO3, mate. If it's a full BO5, what does everyone have to ban casting every game? What happens if you let it through? It's a different match, isn't it? Because that way, if people don't know, that was a real bomber, because that was like the clutch Fnatic that was still really good competitors, Expectors and so as. But it was also the one where Cloud9 had been unbelievable in NA, but because of the stupid format, they just skipped straight to the quarters and then just lost a 3-game series. So all we saw the whole worlds was that. And that was when Meteos was trying to super farm Clear Love style, I never come out the jungle till I'm a fucking team fight threat. That would have been a really interesting. Essentially, that match we always felt like we got blue ball stuff. I know that afterwards it was like a battle that you but I can tell you, most players didn't give a fuck about those tournaments. You just played those as an exhibition. So that series should have been a BO5. That would have been a really spicy BO5.
Yeah. I think there's a class of teams in this kind of question who I would actually just take them versus anyone or anyone else than the team that they would have faced. In Cloud9, I'm I would have taken them versus anyone else at 2013. Cloud9 2013 is legendary. I'd take them versus anyone else. There are some teams which made it to quarters, and I'm just put them versus literally anyone else, and I would have been happier. So I think EDG, sure. EDG 22, I think, is worth that too. Although 22 in general, I think I would have just flip the bracket, whatever, just anything, just don't have COVID. That's the sad thing about 22 Worlds, just don't have COVID. Because EDG should have gone further. They were a better team than losing in a 5-game series to DRX. I think they were hit pretty bad by COVID there. And obviously we don't know whether T1 could have even had an even earlier world streak start without Zeus being ill in finals there. Yep. Another team I'd throw onto that list is LNG 23. I fucking loved LNG 23. What a great team. Just so happened to come up against T1. Scout and Canard, particularly Tarzan just collapsed. Tarzan just collapsed in that series. So I would have just put LNG versus anyone not named T1 in quarterfinals and just see what happens to them. And then I guess the other one on that list would be KT 2018, just put them versus anyone else. I think that if you do that, then I think the Korean downfall is not nearly as bad with that in retrospect. It's just they came up against IG.
I mean, an obvious one. Let's have them play Fnatic. The cap super flat. Yeah, that'll be a fun one. By the way, I'm with you as well. Another angle I also thought of was similar things. It's one where maybe this team wouldn't have won Worlds, but we'd just like to test them against other teams and see how good they are. That's also what I was doing with the HGK one. It's the real problem there is you get no credit because you beat some nobody team that no one remembers. But I think if you played anyone else, either you would give a good showing or maybe even win the game and you get some actual real credit,
Yeah, I agree. I think so I think there's those types of teams. I think there's also the type of teams that the guys that lose to the miracle runs, where you would have just liked to see what happens in the normal worlds. I'm thinking of BLG versus Weibo, right? Weibo go to the final. They beat NRG, then they beat BLG in a 5-game series who've just beaten Genji, right? They go to the finals and man. That ruined the whole championship. Miracle runs are fun, but with Zeka, the Zeka exception, they're always there.
Well, actually, maybe that one even leads to an obvious one, which is, fuck it, if we can't have Genji because they lost to BLG, let's just have the BLG versus T1. Let's have the one where it was the Yagao bin one, but they were really good. And essentially, the only reason they lost that is the Shy just had one extra carry game in the fucking tank still, didn't he? And he ruined the series, the final for everyone, because unfortunately, like a true underdog win, they'd only beaten NRG and then had this one miracle life game against BLG. Aside from that, in the final, they were so fucking bad. I'm with you. Even if I can't have Genji, fuck it, give me BLG. Just change the game 5 result and let me have the original gangster fucking bin actually go against Zeus and see what happens.
Funny thing about that, the Shy to date has the worst KDA of any player in a final series ever because of that series. It was a 0.2 KDA over 3 games. And personally, I think Danny threw him under the bus by blind pick. He had a really it was maybe not 0.2, but he had a really, really low KDA. It was the worst KDA of any player in any final scene. I kind of blame Danny for just blind picking in a bunch of games there and then just allowing peak Zeus counter pick in his Yone top carry era, which was utterly insane. So that just felt like it just ruined finals, really, because actually that was a very interesting Weibo team. I think they had a chance on another day with a different strategy, but even then, just throw BLG in there. Or I think the other angle for this too is that I think that BLG slaughtered Genji because it was Bin versus Thorin in an era where you couldn't really escape that matchup. I think Genji versus any other team in that bracket would have been a more interesting series too. That's another fair
shout. I agree. So I think there's those kind of categories, and then the third kind of categories for me is often when the number one seed, it's almost always the number one seed from NA or the number one seed from LMS, who end up getting fucked because they were the weaker, they were the often top heavy regions with overvalued seeding, right? So it's one of those situations where Flash Wolves playing in a different group, or TSM. The many TSM examples, the Cloud9 example, but also TL 2021, which was the year that they were in the group with Mad Lions, LNG. It was. No, 2021. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the group. They all ended 3-3 in that group.
They were in a group with Genji, Mad Lions, and LNG, and they all
and then
3-3.
everyone ended, and then they had to go and play Genji in their qualifier best of one. And to see TL, I've just got the thing. Yeah, it was LNG. I was right. It was LNG, Mad Lions, Team Liquid, and Genji. And to see that TL versus one of the other teams, either maybe an EDG, maybe an Hanwha Life. I think that TL would have beaten any of the teams, for instance, that ended up on 2-4 in Group A, right?
I mean, if people don't know, one of the reasons Peter's picking this team is it's actually an underrated NA team, because the whole thing that was bizarre about them is they're one of the only NA teams ever that was a good late game team, weren't they? Because they had like the fucking Smithy factor, they had double lift if you could get him online, they had Corgid. So they had, the weird thing about them is people don't rate them because they lost some games by just getting beaten up early by Asian teams. But I'm with you, there's a certain type of a style of team I always thought you could put that team into and they actually could have held up, yeah. But I mean, that was the team that beat RG.
Was this?
Oh wait, he means a different one because 2021.
No, there's two. So there's two TLs.
Okay. So I you mean the one with tactical?
I mean there's the 2021 TL
That's the one with tactical.
Had the really unlucky group, the one with tactical, and the 2019 one with double F, right? So both
confusing them.
Yeah, right. So the one which went 3-3 with everyone, it was a really interesting roster, just not the TL which you think of from like the heyday of NA. So it had Alfari, Thorin, Jensen, Tactical, Core JJ. That was very different from the era before it, actually.
Yeah. But both of those,
I would in that case I would use my wish, like the Irishman and the Englishman, Irishman, Scotsman joke, to undo Peter's wish there. If he made his wish, I'd go next and go, I don't want to see Santorin and Tactical play anyone in a best of 5 ever under any circumstance. Okay. I'll undo your wish.
I will say for this. I will say for this that it's interesting to me as a student of the game to know were NA shit all these years? Like were they?
Yeah, of course.
That's one of your best ones yet, by the way, Thorin. That's good.
I mean, here's the thing. I'd even do it fair. I'd have the genie grant his wish. We'd watch the game. Then my wish would just be, I wish we hadn't watched that. And then all of a sudden it'd disappear out of our memory.
And perhaps that's already happened.
Maybe it has. Twilight's one episode. Exactly.
Maybe we've already seen
exactly.
Oh, God.
By the way, also the bigger topic here as well is, this is why really, if you want to, you could also submit this in a future question. If the question is just who should have met at Worlds, I mean, I have 3 obvious matchups we just didn't almost ever get in League, and it fucking ruined it. The 3 matchups, you all going to know where I'm going with this. It's Chovy versus Faker. We had that once. Yep. It's Rookie versus Faker. We had that once. And it's Knight versus Chovy. I don't think we've ever had that. Like, the idea none of those matchups took place in a Worlds playoff match is crazy work. Because if you don't know, if you're a casual fan, those are like the 3 best mid laners ever. And they've been in loads of, except for Rookie, they've been in loads of playoffs at Worlds. Like, we've just got a lot of unlucky brackets, unfortunately. We don't have double limb, so it's just amazing how rarely those teams have ever met in it. I mean, the idea Rookie and Faker have already met way after their prime and in a fucking qualification match at Worlds is like, what even is that? You know what I mean?
And it was still a good series. And that's the thing which really is heartbreaking for me, is like, it was a good series. It should have been an all-timer 10 years ago.
But you think to yourself, if you can go back in time and you could just make these matches happen in their peak, these would all be banger matchups. By the way, notice I'm not even giving any bias. I don't care who wins these games. I just want to see them. I just think it's criminal that, like, look, I guess people don't feel the Chovy Faker ones much because they played loads in LCK. But the other ones where it was like LPL people didn't meet Faker, that's just criminal. Yeah. It's why bizarrely, actually, I guess the one where the world universe is made up, fair play, at least it's given us a bunch of Knight versus Faker. That's something. Yeah. At least we got a bunch of that matchup.
Yeah. I mean, the problem is at Worlds, there's often like a hero story, like a BDD or a Zeko or something like this, just ruining history, making history for themselves, right? But like ruining what we want,
By the way, that reminds me, we haven't even thought of that one. How about last Worlds? Just Genji beats KT fucking roster and plays T1 in the final. Wouldn't that also be dynamite? Yeah. But what's sad is we've almost just accepted because of how whack that series was. Like, Genji doesn't deserve to win the game or something. But you're right, there's a world they could have played. And they don't have to play the final. Play in the quarters or something. Yeah, exactly.
And then Anyone's Legend as well. You know, they were actually really highly rated at both MSI and at Worlds, to the point where Gen G thought that AL would beat T1 at MSI. They didn't. It was a 5-game series. And then even at Worlds, people were like, well, you know, T1 didn't think, they thought they might lose to AL at Worlds. I think I remember saying that in interviews. Yeah. So what would happen if Anyone's Legend just comes up against any other team, gets to build through the bracket? I think that would have been really interesting. Of course, that was a Chinese Worlds too, to see them on home soil. Yeah. I would have literally, again, I know this is maybe a little bit unsatisfying of you, where I'm not committing to a matchup, because I'm just like, I would have seen the versus. I'll take anything at this point, goddammit. Like, I would have taken anything. And also, actually, from that same Worlds too, because I don't know, 2025, I think it's just because it's so recently, I guess I focused on other stuff. I would have taken the Flying Oysters versus anyone else. What would have happened if we had, like, I don't know, like, could CFO beaten you know, like AL in a best of 5? Probably not, but, you know, would it have been a better show than the shellacking they had versus KT? Should we have had them versus G2 to, like, actually have, like, a pretty close quarterfinals matchup there? CFO last year were a really fun team, and I think a lot of people came to like them. I would have taken them versus, you know, any other team than KT that just stomped them and actually had a really good run to finals.
Yeah, the only other one that I like hurts my soul that I kind of missed is 2017 RNG. This is Arden Sense and Mesa against Samsung.
So I mean, that one should have happened. Faken's ruined it.
Yeah, like this is
ironically.
I mean, or giving Galio 5 games to. Okay, but you know, in front of Chinese fans, you know, Ruler went through one of the big Chinese AD carries, but he should have had to go through 2 of them. So that's my.
Also, without going into a whole sidebar, I even saw in the comment section of the last episode a bunch of people who've had a mass hallucination where they all saw Rulo had some unbelievable run at that Worlds. I'd say go rewatch the VODs. I don't know what you're talking. That was like a hot take from a different show, the Hot Take Point made one. But like those people telling me he had an unbelievable run, I was like, okay, not from what I remember, bro, but okay.
Do you want? I can give you a free hot take for that Worlds, actually, which is I think that Bang in 2017 Worlds is like the most mistreated player in the history of like SKT for that, because that was an era. If people remember that era, everyone teleported bot at like level 4. Everyone did, except Bang, who I think, look, he's not like, I don't think he's an all-timer AD carry in terms of like the top 5, but he's not, obviously this guy was like a multi-worlds champion, did really well. Like he would straight up bash, you know, Uzimata or whoever else came up against him, like had a pretty damn strong international career. And then at that Worlds, like his last Worlds, where he is consistently shit on by people after that, he had a top laner named Huni that would always use second teleport back to lane. In a meta where it was just absolutely unacceptable to do that. So my hot take is that actually Bang was like the most mistreated SKT player ever for that World specifically.
I like
Crazy.
It's a hot take for sure. It's a hot take. But anyway, let's move on. So obviously the sad thing about a lot of those Worlds was we weren't eating good. We actually had to just make do with whatever scraps were left over. It didn't satisfy us. It didn't fill us. It didn't make us feel like that was an amazing meal. Maybe we just needed Huel. If we'd have had Huel back then, that's a complete meal. If you have some Huel, I had some. This is the strawberry banana one. I've had this one a few times. Actually, it is filling because it is just a complete meal. It's not just like a shake that goes with food or otherwise. It has 27 essential vitamins and minerals, no artificial sweeteners, colours or flavours. This bottle version has 35 grams of protein, 7 grams of fibre and is under $5 a meal. And you can get 15% off online for new customers. If you get the powder, that's 40 grams of protein mixes with water or milk in about 30 seconds. And it's spelled Huel. So, limited time offer, make healthy eating simple. Get Huel, Huel, today with my exclusive offer of 15% off online with my code LFN at huel.com/LFN. New customers only. Thank you to Huel for partnering and supporting our show. Okay, we will now go to the second topic, which belongs to Peter. So what is the topic, Peter?
So my topic for this week. So after recent results at MSI and other international events, there have been quite a lot of positivity about the strength of the LEC, whether justified or not. So I guess my question is about regional strength over time. So my question is, how does the global strength of the LEC/EU LCS this year rank in a season-by-season comparison versus every season in the past, right? So let's say, was EU was stronger versus the rest of the world, for instance, let's say in 2019 versus 2022, right? So if we're doing a tier list of EU regional strength,
okay,
from strongest to weakest, or we can do weakest to strongest, where does 2026 rank? And I've deliberately not defined what regional strength means. So maybe that's the thing I'm interested in as well, in hearing how you define Europe's regional strength when you're making a tier list like this?
Yeah, because obviously results, I don't want to play too much into it because, again, we've talked about Worlds formats, and so we've now got the addition of First Stand, which we didn't used to have that. Obviously, MSI having multiple teams in recent eras is more concrete information than we had in previous years as well. And sometimes also it's more about the cohort performance rather than just one team as well. You know, how much do you value just G2 doing well compared to actually everyone on average being better? So I think all of those play into it.
So that's kind of my question, which is when you're judging regional strength, how deep do you go when you're looking at a region? I mean, I can give my answer first, but I think I'm interested in hearing yours.
Put it this way, my general way I thought about this question was, obviously I can see part of why you're thinking here. One, we can't only go off placings because people don't even play each other necessarily. Yeah. Also, by the way, you also can't do what the Americans have to go back to. It can't only be head-to-head either, can it? Like, if our team beats the best region but then loses to you, that doesn't mean by principle property, like that you're better than the better region, does it? So in the same way, are you actually better than us? No, you're just better against us. I know that's really confusing to people, but pretty soon when he was the Roger Federer fan knows the premise. It's like Nadal beating Federer is irrelevant if Federer beats everyone else more, which is it. Are we trying to be the best player ever or the best against one player? So it's a famous argument. So then the other thing to me is this. I also think the other thing that spoils it is, the other thing NA and EU fans do, because it's Corp, is you just take your best team and their best result. So what you do is, G2, if they're really good, then EU's really good. It's like, no, well, the question is, what would fucking the Mad Lions that never do anything at the Worlds, what would they be like against the third best team from any else? And so in general, the way I do it is this. I think I categorize it like this. Regional strength is your top class of teams. That could be 2, could be 4, whatever it might be. The top ones that are like legit teams. What's like the aggregate strength of them versus the other top tier of each region? And listen, if you have an exceptional team like a G2 2019, that can skew it a little bit, but I would just say that's why I aggregated a little bit, because in 2019 I do have to look at Splice and I have to look at Fnatic. I can't orderly say G2, because at the end of the day all I'm saying is G2's better than China, and that's I'm not actually saying LEC is, am I? Because if G2 didn't get off the plane, you wouldn't have any of those results. It wouldn't be anyone in the final. So I think I'm trying to take it like just whatever my elite tier in the region is, I'll aggregate that, but I will only do the top tier. I won't do the whole, because the other thing as well is, I think realistically it would be hard even by the eye test to figure out what the 7th best LEC team would be like versus the 7th best LCK team. Like, I'm too often Narnia at that point. So I've never seen any matchup like that ever, basically.
Also, to a certain extent, too, it depends on how good the best regions of the world are as well. So, for instance, a year, I don't think EU is like... I don't think 2018 EU is better than 2019 EU. And I'd argue it's not actually better than 2017 EU either. I think 2018 is like, it's not bad, but I think that there are years where EU is better. But because Korea kind of shit the bed in 2018, is 2018 higher in your ratings because of that? It's got to be pretty high. World Finals.
Yeah.
That was the RNG upset year as well from G2, so they beat them in the 5-game series. That's an important result.
Yeah.
MSI wasn't anything to sniff at in terms of international competition, but 2018 as a cohort, it's okay. But then also Korea didn't do as well. IG obviously exploded at Worlds, but then Fnatic beat them in a group stage game and then matched up again in finals. They also beat down NA in semi-finals, so and I think they were clearly better than NA that year. So where does 18 come for you guys? I think it's got to be fairly high tier. It's just a question of, with all of these things considered, how high is it?
So I'll just quickly go towards my methodology first. So my methodology, firstly, is essentially, I agree with you. I think it's, unless your number one team is like a massive, massive outlier, I think that. And then you're really just talking about how good that team is. I think kind of my guide is how many teams did I expect to see at the top 8 of Worlds? Or how many teams did I think had a reasonable chance of making the top 8 at Worlds when I'm judging kind of my regional strength. So I'm kind of going down to maybe the 4th best team in the region. Maybe there's a team that didn't make Worlds that I thought could have competed. Unicorns of Love being a good example of a team that frequently failed. So that's kind of my methodology. I think it's good. Maybe we go through like the strongest. Maybe we go strongest to weakest.
Okay.
And see where we rank these different.
Because the other problem as well, which you did almost bake in your question, is we're doing it almost like which years, for example, if you're an EU fan, which years were the best for EU, but you're almost doing it relative to all of history as well, not just that only year. Yeah.
No, so I'm doing it relative to the rest. So how strong was EU relative to the rest of the world in each year? So you could do this with like a different region, but I think EU is the interesting region to do it for, because
I mean, my biggest problem, like I say, is I actually think tournament placings are a very poor indicator of what that is. I mean, an obvious example would be actually something like the aforementioned 2019 Worlds. Like, I'm sorry, because G2, by their own words, by the way, fluked the 2 series against DAM1 and T1, teams that they said were bashing them in practice. Because they did that, does that really make EU better than like China or Korea? Korea would be the obvious one. Like, I'm sorry, I think T1, they not only did destroy Splice, it was they played, right? But they would have destroyed every other EU team. Like what are we doing when we do that, you know?
But I push back on this for 2019, because like Splice took a game off FPX and Fnatic.
What's that got to do with LCK?
Sure, but I'm saying that EU was clearly reasonably strong in that year, right? So the question is,
wait a minute. So Splice winning 1-1 against FPX matches like FPX winning Worlds.
No,
yeah, but we're doing regions. We're doing regions here, bro. Wait, yeah, go on.
But what I'm saying is that Fnatic, like, I'm saying that EU as a whole was strong, right? So
instead of saying strong, give me your rankings. So what region? What was the right regional ranking in 2019?
So in 2019, I think China was number 1, and EU was probably number 3 actually in 2019.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't know where you go. Oh, that's right. Look, I get you want to say Splice won a game against. By the way, I believe that wasn't that the game they put Matter in or something for a fucking gag. But
no, that was against T1. That was against T1 in the quarterfinals.
Oh no, I was talking about the quarters there, but don't worry.
Holy moly, we beat the Korean team and the Chinese team in that was. I completely forgot.
In one game,
we got a game. Yeah, we got a game. I mean,
in like essentially Matter's testimonial. But yeah, okay.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right? Like you go into other years and like, so for instance, I think best year for EU compared to everything is I know you said to cut it off at 2013, I think, in your question when you wrote it down, Peter.
I mean, 2012, I think is.
I mean, there just was no LEC, is what I assume the premise is, right?
Sure. Yeah. But I think realistically, 2012 was when EU as a region was probably best compared to the rest of the world. Yeah, I think, especially as a cohort.
You could even make the case to be edgy. We were number 1 at that tournament. We had 2 teams in the semis that both almost made the final. We're both really strong teams outside of that league. You could argue on some mad kit, because British way, Taiwan can't be number 1, can they? They only had 1 team and they had a fluke run. Korea can't really be better. They had 1 team that, you know what I mean? You could. The maddest thing is you could argue 2012 was the best EU year, even though we didn't get the results.
Yeah, it's definitely top tier. And the thing is that like it took a very long time, basically up until G2 2019, for anyone to invoke Moscow 5 in terms of saying this team has surpassed that. And obviously now bringing it back around to that question, we can bring it into terms of what 2026 means for that too. But I think regardless of like specific placing, 2012 is top tier. Okay. The question is, what else joins it in the top tier? I don't know if it's actually useful to kind of like completely get into the weeds of like exact placing, because I think there's too many ephemeral things. I think while I don't think EU was as good in 2018 as 2017 or 2019, or maybe a couple of other years, I think 2018 has to be top tier too, just because the other top regions also failed mostly.
I mean, the key thing about 2018 is that obviously LCK failed that one. That was one of the only ones they really failed, you know.
Yeah, and I think that means that 2018 also has to be top tier. I would say 2012 obviously better, but I think 2018 is up there. What else is a top tier year, which is kind of in that ballpark from EU? Would we consider 2019, or is that actually a stage below that?
I just feel like it was too carried by G2's the issue.
Oh, interesting.
And that's why I say, believe it or not, the issue really is that even they sort of admit it was a fluke. If that was just us at our best, they even tell you, like, actually MSI was the end of their peak and everything after that was sort of like, you know, keeping the fucking ship together and plugging holes and just hoping you get through the storm, as it were, if the extended analogy. So my problem also with this topic is, unless we're going off placings, in which case what we debated, the place is the placing, surely what we're also asking is things like so I'll give you the problem with the 2018 one. Fnatic was really good. They didn't have to play one Korean, admittedly, but that's also because Freaks fucked up, and that's because KT was on the other side of the bracket. And yeah, that's just how that one went. But the issue is, if you go and look, for example, the Fnatic run's legit, but a lot of that Worlds is carried by G2 having the win over RNG. Well, now the problem with that is that I think everyone would acknowledge that it wasn't supposed to happen. That was one of those incredible, like, holy shit, not only was Perks out of his mind in game 5, but how did Wadid and fucking Yarn survive against the UZI Ming bot lane? Like, on paper, if you play them 100 times, that's one of those ones where analysis, you win 99 times if you're RNG, and that was the one time you don't, you know. So I don't know how much G2 making the semis can carry the whole region at the tournament. I'm not sure. It's hard to judge that one, isn't it?
I mean, I think 2018.
But we're probably going to be second by default because LCK fucked up, right? You know.
Yeah, but I mean,
this is the thing, right? I think you can detract from EU, but the problem is like Korea looked really bad, and and then obviously China didn't have the best showings either. So at that point, you've got like fucking Cloud9 making semifinals of Worlds, and
that's why I asked earlier: are we doing it only for that year, or are we sort of judging on a historical scale too? Because you're right, on that year, that's also one of our best years, but it's also because Korea sucked. It's not like 2019 is better because Korea was good and G2 topped them, you know.
But I've left this deliberately vague because if you think that's the criteria, then we can go with that. You can go with that criteria because to me, I didn't do 2012, but I think 2012 would be number one, right? But I have here in my notes 2018 versus 2019 question mark, right?
Yeah.
And why do I have 2018 versus 2019 question mark? It's because Vitality actually did a lot of work. They were 2-0 against
RNG maybe? Genji, there you go.
Yeah, so they also had good they were also responsible for beating Koreans, right?
Yeah, it was a tiebreaker. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So to me, it was like a team effort in 2018.
Okay, that's actually a fair point. If you take the group stage part, actually, maybe the Vitality means we can bump them. I mean, they get second anyway on that one, but yeah, that's actually probably the best one. Yeah.
By the way, the one everyone's forgotten
is
3-3.
The one everyone's forgotten definitely is we actually didn't even mention 2015. Surely EU's second in that one. Korea's clearly number one in that one, by the way. They only beat each other. Yeah. But that was the one where, famously, the LPL absolutely everyone shit the bed all over. Remember, even bloody EDG, who was the one you could rely on, got to the playoffs and had that pathetic game where like Deft had to teleport Jace. Like that's one of the most embarrassing things from a major first seed contender I've ever seen. Like that's why that year basically gave every single LPL fucking like commentator like PTSD because they were scared to ever again say maybe the LPL can do so because you felt like a dickhead because it's like they didn't just lose, they shit their own pants in front of the whole school in that analogy, didn't they? Like that was really embarrassing. So I think for that one EU has to be second, surely, because that was like a very strong overall performance.
MSI was 5-game series versus SKT in semis as well, right? And that was the MSI. It was the first ever MSI, and then Febiv and Solo killed Faker a couple of times. I mean, I think the one holdback there is just how fucking stomped EU got stomped in semis. So like they were a distant second.
Certainly.
And also one of the Korean.
But you could also argue that might have been LCK's best year though too. You could also argue that.
For sure. Which is why like it's definitely up there. The question is, do you view it as, because I think in 2019 you can be like, well, okay, actually they were pretty close to the top teams and it's a rock, paper, scissors, blah blah blah. So like for me, 2015, it is absolutely a notable year, double semi-finalist. That's insane. And MSI wasn't bad either. But I think I have it just like one rung down, just because of how dominant Korea was. And I'm doing this very much in terms of like, because the question is about compared to the rest of the world. This isn't just how good they were, because I actually think EU was great that year. So happened Korea was on great form. This was like peak, just heading into the peak of like absolute Korean dominance. One of the things for earlier question, I could have also mentioned, KT Rolster in 2015 Worlds, match them up against anyone else as well, not against Q Tigers. Do you just get 3 LCK semi-finalists?
Also, here's how you know that I run a serious show here, even though there's jokes and hypothetical. I'm not going to do what they would have done if this was like fucking Euphoria or Jat and Vedius, which is on the last question I should obviously have just picked. Well, what if the Season 5 Worlds final had been Fnatic versus Origin and they'd won their semis? Well, neither of them were ever winning any of those semis, you fucking lunatic. Like, I don't even have a strong enough imagination to fantasize the world where that one happened. That wasn't any format. That wasn't the format. Exactly. Yeah, I need the fucking waters of life. Exactly. Then maybe and it would kill me to do it. It would kill me to do it. I'm not the Chris Alexander.
I do think the 2015, like I mentioned this before many times, which is the Gragas disable between quarterfinals and semis.
I genuinely don't think that changes anything.
No, I don't think it changes the results, but I don't think both of those series end of 3-0. Like,
I mean, his logic would be like amazing, would be better, for example, wouldn't he, in the series that they play?
Because they wouldn't be able to just target him in the same way, right?
Right.
Like,
yes.
So, I mean, they lose both of those series. Like, EU do not go to the final in 2015. Like,
I still think it's 3-0, mate.
You think it's 3-0? I think it's 3-1, 3-1. I go 3-1.
I think it's not close. I think everyone's getting their heads caved in. It's not close.
Okay, it's interesting because I thought I had like a kind of controversial take over 2018. 2018 being like number 1, but number 2 for
again, like because again, I think a lot of people will just default to saying, "Oh, was it EU's best year in terms of did they play well?" I mean, I don't think they played as well as other years, but compared to the rest of the world, because the top team slipped up.
Okay. But would you put 2019 over 2015 then?
In terms of compared to the rest of the world, I would. Yeah. I would.
All right, you know what? Fuck it. Since it's an EU relevant question, we're all from EU. I will, just for gags, do a serious but half version of what I just said of homerism. You know, the year, obviously, that we let the bloody Americans get away with because of the placings. And here's the thing. If you're actually an EU fan, you're a fool if you get overly salty when NA outplaces EU, because just wait. Just wait. If you wait long enough, they don't do it every year and they're not going to. And eventually they'll get a bad run too. Like, it's like the joke that Jad had to make, because at this point, Americans have to like veil their analysis in fucking cynicism to not ever actually have to feel the pain of the loss. Jad's joke's a good one, which is that Inspired's real true secret is pathing through tournaments and never having to play the fucking really good teams, because what he does is get to beat the EU teams and then never have to beat the Elite Asian team. So his joke is that's the way his pathing's God. Like, he never faces the good team. But it's almost like that, because here's the one that everyone forgets about. This is the controversial one. The controversial one's 2014. Because if you look at the groups, what are you talking about, Thorin? All your best teams didn't get out. No. We're not talking about placing. Look at the strength of the teams, right? First of all, the Alliance team quite literally almost twice perfect gamed a Korean team. They did one time and they almost did it another time. They were doing quite well against Cloud9, but they just lost again. If they essentially didn't do whatever they did that caused the insane Kabum upset, they're in the playoffs. I'd like to see that. Meanwhile, TSM got out of the group with fucking RNG, the scoffed version, and SK without their star fucking jungler and no Korean team. Like, again, I don't care that you placed ahead. You go into the fucking Nadia White Shield group and do that. If you do it, I'll give you the props. Also, that was the one where Fnatic, quite literally, if Cyanide hits a fucking Nexus, they win the game against OG. They're out the group as well. So that's one of those ones where, I'm not a fucking EU LOL player, so I don't really need to feel personal. Again, I follow the teams I like. But that was one where NA got to say they were better, but I don't know if they actually were. By the way, I'd love to see those matches. Let's have that TSM against Alliance. Let's have fucking OMG against Cloud9. Let's have those Fnatic against Cloud9. Let's have those games at that Worlds. That would be fun too.
Remember the Fnatic OMG disaster? They had like the utter group of death, like Samsung Blue and OMG. So on the eye test, EU was better than NA at 2014 Worlds. Were the results better for TSM and Cloud9? Yes, they were. Alliance slipped up. That's on them. Sure, you have to hold that against them. But yeah, I mean, like SK, I think they were genuinely a fantastic team in 2014 when they had Svenskeren. And then Svenskeren had just some dodgy solo queue account. It was a dumb thing to do. You shouldn't do that as a pro player. And, he got cut for 3 games. And those 3 games...
I'll make you even madder, because it's not only that bad. This was only revealed something like 2 or 3 years ago in a Reflections interview with me. I've meant to get round to make like a short, because it would just be like a personal gift to my friend Monte Cristo. Right, bro, there are a couple of instances in history where Monty essentially was like, hi, I'm a time traveller. Here's the Gray's Sports Almanac of what happens. And Western pros go, what's this? And chuck it in the bin and walk off. So here's the real story Svenskeren told. At that Worlds, that was when Monty was the secret coach of SK Gaming. Svenskeren even says Monty came to him and essentially explained to him before that Worlds how Samsung White vertical jungling worked, and Svenskeren just thought like, the fuck's he talking about, and just went on with his game as normal. That is enraging. If you don't know, I'm essentially saying Monty told them before the Worlds the tactic every other team for the rest of the next 4 years of League of Legends, how everyone played League of Legends. But Svenskeren in that moment thought it was just some sort of like, LS pipe dream of like, it's just some crazy theory. And he didn't listen. He even admits now, like, I just didn't really know what he was talking about, unfortunately, which is like, that is madness, bro. Like, if you knew that in advance, you could have literally just like checkmated half the teams there. And you're Svenskeren, you're the fucking king dueling jungler as well. You would be so good at that style, mate. That's why Monty was right.
And there are so many different things in League which could have been revealed earlier and just didn't happen. I mean, stuff like when lane swaps came back around again in 2024, that could have happened for a number of years at that point. Of course. With mage bot lanes and the random champions who've got bot lane right now, I actually don't think that's dependent on...
By the way, that's even something I'm going to ask you, Marto, about on some of the insight. I genuinely think, by the way, some of the whole mage bot lane thing is just people... Remember, they admitted in their interviews, all the ADCs don't even think about mages as a thing. So because they don't think they should be a thing, they won't do it. So as long as they have the gentleman's agreement unspoken, we don't try this. For all we know, there might have been a season a couple of years ago where there was some unbelievable mages bot lane with some of the combos for it, because remember, it's oftentimes that's based on what the support is too, isn't it? So the silly, I'm with you. I actually think that shit could have been around years ago. We just didn't know.
Well, all of this stuff happened in 2018 and particularly 2019, and then just people forgot about it after Syndra got nerfed in 2021. Like there's a lot of
because by the way, I'll give you an example. This is a simple one in case you don't follow the game. But this actually happened in CS:GO, believe it or not. In CS:GO, there was literally a gun. It's called the Krieg, which is like a more expensive like T weapon. And because it's more expensive, and already the AK is a mega, it's arguably the best gun in the game, especially like economically. People just never tried using this weapon, and then people found out literally something like a year or two later, it was the most OP gun in the game, and then everyone abused it for like a solid year till it got taken out. But essentially that was there again the whole time. And if you popped out of a time machine, whatever it was, 2 years earlier, and just said to people, just trust me, use that, you would actually have instantly been like 1.5 times better than everyone. Like, people think these things don't exist because the logic we normally use is we're sort of treating pros like a giant neural net of people trying every possible combination to win, and we assume they get to the end of the maze every time. But actually sometimes they essentially don't go down a path, which was the real secret way to get there. I mean, by the way, LS is probably, this is his entire specialty. If people don't know, as an analyst, like all his point about the Moonstone, it's like, that shit was there for ages, bro. Some of these picks on support have been there for ages, but people only used them Randy and solo queue. That's actually one of the fascinating things about esports. Sometimes there genuinely is a whole paradigm. People just don't look into that box and it just stays over here, and it could have worked, right? You muted yourself, Peter.
The problem they have is, I think that fans don't realize, is that the veteran pros have a vested interest in the meta staying the way that it is, because that gives them the experience advantage over new players coming. It means that, you know, if they're still pros after a long period of time, it means that they've been successful in this meta, right? So the people who have to kind of challenge the meta and change the meta are are rookies coming up, right? And this is why I think so many times Europe has been at the forefront of metas changing. Because Europe was a region where always a rookie team would go to Worlds for like many years in a row, because they had innovated, they came in, and then they had that advantage, right? And then obviously things change with franchising and things like this, right? But I don't think it's kind of a situation where, so a lot of fan anger goes and like blames pros. Oh, but they have a vested interest in things not changing, right? Like it's really like it's and I guess Fearless in a way has kind of shaken people. Like you can't do that anymore, right? But
there's a famous quote, Peter, that you're basically describing. It was by Upton Sinclair, and he said, "It is difficult to get a man to understand something when his salary depends on his not understanding it."
Yes, that's a banger.
It's a banger, isn't it? Yeah. It's fire. Because it's what you're describing.
So what often happens is effectively, you know, there's a certain amount of inertia you need to cause within balance for people to pick stuff up in the first place. Something has to be so unbalanced for you to pick it up outside of the norm, to then practice it, but then once you practice it, as Peter said, you keep at it. We saw this in 2015 with Vladimir, and Vladimir got nerfed, I want to say 5 or 6 times back-to-back, and he was still meta for 2 years solid, from 2015 to 2017 after his rework. He was even meta a little bit in 2014. But it took him getting absurdly broken and getting nerfed back-to-back for that to happen. We saw this with Aphelios was nerfed a bunch after his release, and these people still played him. We saw this, well, we even see it now with a bunch of different champions. A lot of the AD bruisers have been nerfed a fuck ton. So many of the current jungle pool have been so nerfed, but people have just practiced on them. And often what happens is people will just keep at this one style, because again, it's that not many people within League of Legends are innovators. Back in 2023, one of my favorite teams to watch was OMG in the LPL, because they were your favorite coach's favorite team, because they did all of the stuff which no one else did.
He's on the one that was fucking, Cream, Aki,
it was Shanshi, Aki, Cream, Abel, and PP. Got a lot of players. Yeah, it was the one which I will dominate, championed a lot. They never made it international. They never made it beyond top 4, but they were really good. They managed to like play top side and a bot side focused meta when everyone was playing Zero Yuumi. But they did that effort, so you didn't have to, and you could just copy them, and it made it so easy. And there will be 1 or 2 teams trying that out there in the world every so often, but not a crazy amount. Not a crazy amount. So yeah, I mean, the whole conversation right now about Major's bot lane and stuff, that shit's been there for a while, like a long time. That hasn't just needed to be this specific series of things. It's been strong for a while. As long as you had the mind for it, you could do it. And a lot of people just didn't invest in that. And you know, as LS has been saying, you know, there's an analytical term within statistics which is about local maximum. Effectively, if you've got a wibbly graph where there's like lots of peaks, you think you might be in a high point because everything goes down either side of you. Realistically, you go like a meter to the side or whatever, actually there's a higher peak there, but you got to go down the trough to reach the highest point on it. Because if you're looking for the highest point on the entire possible graph, you might have to do a bit more exploring. It might make you worse in the short term, but you can reach somewhere higher after that. Obviously, there's a...
It's why, by the way, if you notice, the area that LS was actually smart wasn't even just coming up with these ideas and making videos. It was actually befriending pros who then try things in real competitive games. Because even though it's a dark reality, that is what convinces people. Is when they see when they see Inspired pick the Ivern all the time, then suddenly they believe it's a real thing. If you'd have just said, hey, check out this Ivern angle, and it's a solo queue angle, everyone would go, what does LS know? That wouldn't work in pro play.
I'm going to say something which is going to tilt you, Thorin, but this is why I always champion Xerxes. Because this is the thing that Xerxes, as a pro...
Why didn't he do any of it in pro play then?
No, he did. He was like the first person to pick
yeah, I'm fucking with you, obviously. I know, it's all good.
I mean, this was the one... And obviously people were like, oh, Xerxes is a crazy, Yeah. He can't play the meta thing. This is always what happens. When you innovate, people immediately say, oh, the only reason you're innovating is because you can't play the meta. And this is, yeah, so this...
What I love is that, do you know who disagrees with you, Peter? Xerxes.
What?
Yeah.
For some reason, the weirdest thing about you and him's relationship is you have a completely 180 perspective on who he is. Because, by the way, this is why I think he didn't do himself any favours. He actually thinks all the opposite of all the stereotypes that are clearly true about his style of play. He thinks he's some late game macro genius and that he's mega... All the things everyone thinks he's weak at. I didn't play weird picks. I play all the meta. It's like that. Yeah. So what's weird is you're doing a good job championing him and always have us. He's an unusual idiosyncratic player. And then it's like that thing I always say about the Shy. You think the Shy's mad from his in-game. Read his interviews, bro. He was saying stuff to Rookie like, hey, I actually prefer playing tanks and we're the only ones who don't int. And I always used to think Rookie must be looking at him like, are you trying to rage bait me? This can't be real. None of that's true. But I actually don't think he was rage baiting. I think he's just like this. I think he just had a totally different conception of himself than everyone else.
One thing I find very interesting about Xerxes was, so I actually got to chat with Xerxes quite a lot because I cast him a lot in LEC 2022. He's one of only about a very small handful of players, 2 or 3, which just did not care about your background and just listen to what you said. And I know this sounds crazy, but so many players will only listen to you if you have basically credentials. Yeah, were you on a team? Have I played against you? Have you coached me? Have you coached someone I know? Basically that kind of thing. And it was Xerxes, Treats, and not many other players beyond that, which actually just, if you just said something good, they would agree, they'd give you the credence for it, or they'll challenge you on it as well. But yeah, Xerxes was the kind of player who really struck me as that. He was a very good communicator and he kept his mind open, which I think plays into the whole experimenter thing he would do. He'd do what he thought was good rather than what conformed to good.
Yeah, I mean, to be clear, Xerxes knows that I think differently of him than he thinks of himself, right? And it's in 2020, it's no secret that I went to Xerxes and was like, I want you and Humanoid to lead my rookie team. And he was like, I'm not the guy to lead your rookie team. I'm going to a really, really dodgy other roster because I don't think I'm the right kind of guy to lead rookies. And he could have. So that's all I'd say. That's all I say to Xerxes. I'm not sure how we even got to talk about
it's all good. We've already done the discussion. It was about ranking all the seasons of a year.
Oh, it was about ranking the teams. Yeah.
Oh, we should get towards 2026. We didn't want to put 2026 in there. Right. So, back to the actual question. Where does 2026 rank among these?
So there was one side thing I had, which is results. So 2014, obviously, no EU team got out of groups in 2014. And you make it, that's a disaster. Well, do you think 2014 was a worse year than 2016 when H2K got to the semis? The answer is, well, if you think yes, you're obviously completely delusional, right? He was obviously stronger in 2014 than they were in 2016, right? I don't think there's any debate, right? So I agree with you. That was the last thing we were talking about. So I agree with you that results shouldn't matter, and therefore 2014 is a year that should rank highly, right? So I think the way that we've gone so far is 2012, 2018, 2019.
Yeah, something like that. And then it's 2015 is somewhere just... I put 2015... Yeah.
Yeah, then 2015, right? I think we're all kind of on the same page. Main debate was 2019 or 2018 high. Okay. Do you have 2014 next, Thorin?
Yeah, I had it pretty high.
Okay. Okay, so for me, I had 2014 below 2020.
Again, that was very G2 centric, right? Because they made quarters of worlds.
Right. I wouldn't have it below that. No. I would have. Here's the thing. I would have most of the G2 years in the top 3 or 4. Yeah. Certainly, yes.
Because I thought Fnatic were actually pretty decent in.
Let me check back to.
That was the one where they had the TS series.
Yeah, that was the
the 5-game series. Yeah,
like I think Fnatic were like that was self-made at its prime. That was enough to put me over.
That's not bad. Yeah, that's not bad. That could be in the top 3 or 4. Yeah.
Yeah, but then obviously third team of Rogue was not fantastic that Worlds. They only came online. Well, Rogue only really had like one great Worlds at 22, and even then they didn't make it out of groups.
Yeah.
Although, by the way, 2022, if we're going on aggregate, not a bad year for EU. That was the one where Fnatic had the one that was like a pretty strong fucking set of players. Wasn't that the one where...
That was Hilly, right? Upset Hilly?
Let me think.
22?
Yes, that was the one where they beat T1 in a game and they almost beat EDG and they'd beaten Cloud. They were actually doing decent, that one. That was obviously Rogue themselves with champions that were half decent. I mean, they got out the groups. And then G2, that was the one, admittedly, with the Targamas Flak and bot lane, but it was still a decent squad of players. There was in a group of death, if you remember. So that was an aggregate pretty good year for you going on the floor of EU. Yeah.
Yeah, 22 wasn't bad. Didn't quite have like the results.
No, it didn't have the high, the ceiling, Because by the way, if we're actually going to judge this against this year, I've got to say, I think this year is going to be pretty bad. Because remember, I'm sorry, all the KC results were EWC, bros. That's not even a fucking Riot tournament. Like at Worlds, if I put a gun to your head, and it's not you're right or wrong, it's a gun. You die if you're wrong. Are you taking KC to make a run to the playoffs? I'm fucking not. Like, I'll wait to see it, mate. And then, by the way, forget MCOY. Any year that has an El Yoya MCOY without Humanoid in the team is a fucking travesty at Worlds, bro. They are dragging the average down like a motherfucker. Not even because they're bad teams. They're just bad international teams for whatever reason. No one's ever really figured it out. That's one of the big mysteries for me is why do these Spanish MCOY why do they just suck so much internationally? Like, it's bizarre because they're so good at like being scrappy in LEC playoffs, aren't they? And making great series against KC into G2. But then internationally, they just drag the whole region down, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a real shame because actually, like, I mean, yeah, we've seen what the peak can be. I mean, I think that Mad Lions at points were really good.
Definitely.
I think 2021, sadly, results didn't match the level of play. I mean, we've talked about that MSI in a previous episode in terms of how well that plays. I think 2021, it's a bit strange, right? Because obviously that was like a bit of a weirder G2 year because that was the Reckless year, which didn't go well. So they didn't make MSI. Obviously, it was single elimination, so it was only one team. Didn't make Worlds. I'm trying to remember how the rest of that Worlds actually went for EU.
Which, by the way, in itself, you could argue takes some points away from the strength of EU anyway, because a lot of our best players literally were locked in a team that didn't make Worlds. Like, that's also the bomber. It's like, you sort of took a lot of the best. Like, remember, you could have taken, because that's how they made that team, you could have taken that G2 team and made 3 really strong teams out of them, couldn't you? But instead, we made a super team of what on paper looked like 5 Hall of Famers. I mean, they will be one day. And then we just didn't send them a World. So, yeah, that'll make your region worse at Worlds, definitely, of course.
Yeah. I mean, there was a real, that kind of era was like, I think after 2020, after the GT Super Team kind of elapsed, when was the next year you would actually say was like actually getting up there again?
That's why I say it. Like, the real problem is, I mean, also, isn't the other problem with this whole discussion, because we're taking placements out of it, the best team from EU has just been G2 all these years, and the issue was, like, they only made that playoffs this one last time. Other times, they kept fucking up and not making the playoffs, even though you look on paper, those are some pretty good teams. Like, that's why they were able to... Remember, people forget that one where they lost to NRG. Before that, they were smoking the tournament. They were looking really good even in the games they lost against LCK and top. The problem is, the NRG game was just the ultimate speed bump, wasn't it? In that analogy, they died when they hit the speed bump.
Sure. I mean, I think part of the problem, though, is, you know, that Nemesis Fnatic year where they almost beat top. I feel like there hasn't been a year where EU has sent 2 good teams to Worlds that I thought could make the quarterfinals since then.
No, of course not.
So at that point, okay, when was so maybe the easiest way to decide this then for 26 was when was the last year EU had a year as good as 2026 right now?
Okay,
like
I think that's
at this point in the year, or what do you think? Is that an easier way to try and pass it? Because I think 25 was a shit show because MSI was really bad, even with the World's quarterfinals. I don't think it's 25. Agreed on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so 24, no one got out of groups again, right? We didn't make a quarterfinals, but G2 did beat top esports.
MSI.
The MSI was good, but I don't think that's
for G2.
Yeah, Fnatic was kind of a bit shit though.
Fnatic. So still at this point better than 2024.
Yeah,
and we just don't talk about Mad Lions that year, so skip that one.
Well, 23 G2 actually looked good, but again didn't get any results. And then like Fnatic again was that another tragedy year? And then that was an MCOY at Worlds. Did they get? Was that the year they got knocked out by like PSG or
something
GAM?
like that? I believe so.
Again, 23. So better than 23. 22, 21 both not, even though the eye test is all right, I think we can both kind of skip over them. So is it better than 2020 with G2 actually still being like end of their heyday, didn't have an MSI? Is it even conclusive because there wasn't that much international play in 2020? I mean,
this is why the worst thing, they've done it again. They've done it twice in this discussion. Why did G2 Perks have to tell us it was a fluke who won those games against Koreans? If we could just say, hey, this year they beat Gen G and T1, mate, that's a brilliant A for Worlds. It should be good then. Fuck it, maybe they can make semis, lads. The problem is, if you tell us, you yourself, none of you believe that. Look, it's not like, by the way, it's not like a witness testimony counts for everything, but we're going to assume you're not lying about like your strength as a team. So if you're being serious that your real level is like, we have a hard time against GX in scrims, yeah, then I'm sorry, I can't put you in an all-time list of like, the region's really strong, because like, say what you like about the LPL, most of their teams would still smoke a team like that, surely. Maybe not, who knows?
Yeah, I think 2020, Fnatic, obviously Fnatic had the 5-game series versus top esports, and we don't have an MSI. I think it's probably more interesting discussion if we say, okay, well, we didn't have an MSI, skip over to 2019. And at that point, I think it's like, well, 2019, I think that's a better year than 2026 so far because of the crushing Lion 3-0 defeat, which kind of, if it was like a finals MSI at that point, I'd be willing to give this year a chance versus 2019 because of losing to Lion, and particularly with T1 looking really shaky. I don't think I can put this year over 2019.
Okay, so then I'll go through all the years then left. Okay, so we talked about 2012, 2014, 2015, 2018, 2019 better, right? So that leaves 2 years, right? Which is season 3, 2013, and 2017, right? And 2016 we talked was the H2K year where EU was down.
2017, G2 made MSI finals. That's actually a decent result. Got smashed by T1 SKT at that point in finals. That was also peak era of Korean dominance.
Yeah.
I don't think EU are closer to the top than they were now. I think 2017, Wasn't
2017 the year that Ignar...
Misfits one, yeah.
That's true. Shit, that's a fair point, actually. No, you're right, actually. That was
but do you believe that was real, though?
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, do you believe it?
Because my problem with that one is, here's the reason why I never let people romanticize that too much. You're doing the NA thing again. You were an underdog and you didn't win the series, but you're talking about it like it's an all-time great upset. You didn't even get the upset. Like, bro, that's a team who shouldn't have beat them, and they didn't. Like, that sounds like everything worked out, boys. Like, I don't know what the mystery is. We don't need the X-Files on that one. Everything checked out, yeah. If anything, the real question is, how did T1 lose those 2 games? But whatever, it's all good.
But I mean, it's also worth.
It's all nice. It's nice that Ignar can dine out on that and get about 7 extra NA contracts as a result. It's all good. Enjoy the money. That's why. Listen, as a PAG player, I appreciate the idea you ignore the enchantment meta and just do what you want. But it wasn't a great strategy overall. I've got to say, it worked in like 1 game.
I would say, as somebody who's coaching now, he's a really great guy. So like that
he'd have to be, mate. He'd have to be. Notice you did. By the way, what people don't realise there, Nymaera, is that actually Peter just dropped the craziest fucking diss of all time there. But you have to know Peter to know that.
That's the thing you reach towards. He's a great guy.
I know. That's why I didn't complete it. Cause it's like you don't want to make the punchline too obvious. That was actually a banger. That's the closest Peter would ever come to actually trash you.
Look, he's really good. He's really good at engaged supports, and he's a really awesome teammate, right? I mean, that was also so that was the Misfits. So Misfits almost beating SKT, and Fnatic made the quarterfinals, but that was the most fraudulent quarterfinals. Like Fnatic were in a garbage.
Yeah, but you know what? I'll counter that though. At the same time, though, that was the really unfair one for G2 because that was the one where they were giving awesome games to RNG and Samsung. By the way, 2 semi-finalists, but you can only get 2 teams out of the group. So like, if they win one of those games, boys, that's an interesting group. Like that was the year they had the MSI. They were really good. That was still the best in the West bot lane. That was essentially what should have been the redemption worlds for what happened at the season 6 one, wasn't it? Yeah. But this time around they played great, but just lost the games, unfortunately.
They got 2 teams out of groups, and the 3rd team was Group of Death by RNG Samsung. Like
that's actually that's a slept-on year.
And then also like G2 MSI finals as well. 3.
Oh, by the way, we also should have done that one too. That's also a year where I want to see G2 in one of those BO5s because that was the famous one where we're a BO5 team. We're not really like a BO1 team, remember? And that wasn't just quote, by the way. That was true. If you ever saw them, they used to do it in the EU as well. They'd fuck around in the regular season where it was the BO1, and then the playoffs they were unbeatable. No one could fuck with these guys.
Was that Sven Mithy year? That was Sven Mithy, right?
That was the end of it. That's the. By the way,
Sven Mithy would have been great.
You could even argue if they'd have had a deep run at Worlds that year, maybe they don't go to TSM. You know what I mean? Maybe that might even have changed all of EU history.
Yeah. I think as a cohort, again, like distance to the top as a cohort, I think that as a cohort, EU performed better. I think that distance to like the very top teams in the world, still not that close. I think G2 is closer right now, but as a cohort, I think that's a better year for EU still. Like, just I'm trying to adjust for time period or whatever. I think 2017 probably is a bit better, just because again, like we're talking about a one-team performance from G2 this year. It's a great performance. 6 is fucking incredible. It is, but then getting blasted at first time finals anyway. MSI, we think it's a great tournament, and then obviously T1 probably not the greatest example of themselves.
Also, here's another reason why I think we're being fairer by doing it by aggregate. Because the other trick that everyone does is this. They not only count only the best performer. By the way, they're so fraudulent, they don't even count it as best performer going into it. They just wait and they throw the darts at the wall, and then they draw a circle around one and go, it hit the bullseye. That was the best EU team. If it's not the number one seed, mate, how would that make the region better? But anyway, they do that. But simultaneously, they play the game of doing the opposite with the LPL. Since the LPL always sends one team that just sucks a dick, they just go, that boosts EU. And it's like, yeah, but in the other case, you might have like 2 potential winners of Worlds as LPL, but then you have the one, it's often top esports, obviously, they have the one that just brings it so far down, the aggregate's dragged down. So I also think the LPL makes this conversation way harder.
Yeah, because but earlier on you said, well, we can't shadowbox 7th versus 7th, but we do know that like the team that would have gone instead of top esports probably like if WWE
would still be a very good team, right? Yeah,
with the meta at MSI, WWE would have been probably far. Well, first time there's a lot of extra.
I mean, that's also the same argument about Rookie's career, isn't it? True. It's not. Here's what people don't get. I'm not salty that he lost a bunch of regionals. I'm salty that oftentimes he played greater, but worse, a lot of the teams that won those regionals were the fucking joke teams, mate. Like the ones that. Oh, wow, they made Worlds. Yeah, at the expense of actually what was at the time a contender team in the fucking region, unfortunately. And as everyone knows, the only reason I hate upsets, I don't hate the team that does the upset. Congratulations. I hate that it ruins the tournament because it makes the next matches not as good.
Man, here I am asking this question, hoping that you guys are going to like give, new MKOI fans, new KC fans who haven't followed LEC history something to hold on to.
No, it's all, Peter, if anything, this is a black pill. It's over. You need a time machine and you need to go back to a year that says 201X. You put the X in, but the problem is that it's done, mate. That super team was the fucking zenith. That was the high point, and it's all downhill ever since then, mate. Obviously not what Romain says in the room after every off-season.
Okay. So pre-2019, you had...
Well, I tell you what, that's a good speech, Perks. Write that down. Maybe use that one for a match or something, mate. It's pretty good.
You have to give me 2016, right? Like, this year we're better than 2016.
I think so.
EU is better than... Like, 2016 is the SK... H2K making semis. It's the year G2 come bottom of the group.
G2 shit the bed completely.
Yeah. For the entire year. Spicy bottom. Okay, right. So better than 2016.
Yes.
2013 is... no, I think
Fnatic Gambit. That's actually pretty good as a cohort.
That's not a bad
Gambit
one,
beat Samsung Ozone.
Yep.
Fnatic actually pretty good. I look again. This is really good for this era of League. I think the reason why 2026 for EU feels so fucking good is that we haven't had something this good since 2020. Well, 2020, 2019, that kind of era. We've had like a complete just black hole for so long. Back then, 2012 through to 2017, EU were like, even up to 2012 through to 2019, we were like expecting a team in quarterfinals since semifinals, maybe. I think if we
expecting.
Semi-finals was
I'll go one further. Yeah. Until the LPL actually did it and won Worlds, the real debate, this is why Americans, mate, it's like the World Cup, sit out until your turn. The real discussion was LPL versus LEC. We all understood LCK was the best. In the end, whoever their best team is will win the tournament. Like, everyone gets that. But the real discussion at most of them, especially because there would always be the one LPL team was shit, it was actually, can the better EU, maybe we can play them and beat them. Like, that was the matchup everyone wanted and did happen a few times.
And it often came down to home crowd. If the tournament was in the EU did better. If the tournament was in China did better. If the tournament was in NA, it was it was a toss-up, right?
Which, by the way, is also why the Koreans are the GOATs. They just fucking perform everywhere, boys. Like, they don't need the home crowd. Yeah, they're the best, aren't they?
So I could imagine this comes across as quite unsatisfying for people who are really wrapped up in the hype of this year. And it's still a great year for the era. But then you correct for that. And actually, overall, this doesn't compare to like 10 years ago when EU were actually consistently really fucking good, at least sending like actually every single team was pretty good. I think one of the most disappointing things I think over the last 5 years is how the depth of EU meant that we've never really sent like 2 on-form teams at the same time, really. Not for a long time.
And also, this discussion is way better. I know people have submitted this in the past, so submit it again, we'll do it. An obvious question we should do one day on this talk show is, if you're from EU or Korea, you can have this whole convo and go, that's cute and everything, but if we just didn't have importing, wouldn't it just be LCK and LEC? You wouldn't be any NA, would there? They would all, it's carried by you players. LPL, sorry boys, you won a lot of your worlds with Korean solos, didn't you? So that would be the based question, isn't it? What happens if there's no importing? What if it's really 5 AU players, 5 NA players, 5 Koreans, 5... I'd like to see that world. I think it would be an interesting counterfactual, wouldn't it?
I mean, part of the problem is that you would have 3 strong EU teams at Worlds, and like I've seen people genuinely after last... and I don't even think it's that crazy after watching the games from last weekend. Say, could Fnatic actually make Worlds? After they've made the swap, right? Because the third place, like teams have... EU fans have so little faith in the third place team that...
Oh, yeah, here's the problem there, Peter. What they're doing there, I'm gonna call out EU fans. You're doing the LPL thing, which is, I understand why at the international tournament you hate top esports, but understand they didn't get there for free. They got there by beating the teams you like.
Exactly.
So the same thing. You know what? I'm with you, Peter. MCOY, by the way, I don't even hype them at internationals. I'm bored of them just failing with this core and doing it over and over again. But I'll tell you what, I do respect that they don't play like that in the LEC playoffs, though. Like, people might, you want to laugh right now. Let's see them play Fnatic. Let's see Fnatic play MCOY in that low bracket game that gets you the last world spot. Because if you put them under that pressure, I don't know if they make it, mate. I've seen that's exactly where I feel like MCOY would pull it out, even if they then might go and again betray everyone at Worlds and fucking up and lose to GAM or VKS or something. Who knows who they can lose to? But that's also one of the mysteries of the fucking this game, isn't it? International players, specifically Worlds, is a different dimension than domestic play for some reason. Yeah. Even if it's the same players, it's just different, isn't it?
Yep. Okay. No, I think that's a
that's a good enough one. I'll let you ride that one a little bit, but whatever. It's all good. Now, along those lines, though, we've got some pretty good poly markets. So here's one. If you go to the prop section, actually, I think this is a really fun one. In 2 days at the time of recording, in 9 hours, so probably about a day and a bit after you get the episode as a VOD, we've got... Listen, this point in time, I know why they still keep the Telecom one. Someone needs to come up with a name for this matchup. How does this matchup, after how many years it's been the matchup, potentially in the world and LCK, not of it? Gen G against T1, the one everyone loves, is back. Obviously, the third place game at EWC, lol, whatever. I'll pretend someone told me I had to say that. I didn't really. I just say it because it's banter. And also, how does even EWC get Gen G versus T1 as many times as Worlds with half as many fucking tournaments? Let's not worry about that. So, when this matchup happens, obviously right now it's a spicy one because actually people are feeling Gen G. Gen G's at 59% to win this. T1's at 42%. Don't worry about those numbers and why they don't add up. I'm not a scientist. I can't explain it, but there is a reason why. A question to you, gentlemen, is who wins and which is the better value?
Well, we saw Gen G T1 fairly recently, and Gen G did win, but then obviously at Road to MSI, they lost. They were both close series.
And the problem with the EWC one, surely, is it's a third place game, and who gives a fuck about third place games? You know what I mean?
It's a third place team. There's international travel, meta shift on the fly. But I think even then, you can tell the teams are close. Has the needle moved particularly? I think because it's so close, I err towards the lower number, basically.
Okay.
Just because
if the logic is if it's a coin flip, you just get more value from Team 1, essentially. Right,
even though I probably would go Gen G based on just pure analysis if you're telling me who's going to win based on percentages or whatever. I'm just wondering if the value is on the lower number because I don't think it's by a crazy amount. What do you think, Peter?
I'm going Gen G. I've said before that I think unless the meta changes, T1 don't beat Gen G. I think T1's best player right now is their AD carry. And,
that's true.
He doesn't get to if Gen G want to shut down AD carry, they want to just shut down bot lane and make it about roaming sports. They can go and do that, which takes away Carrier's biggest strength, which is his 2v2 laning. He's not bad roaming, right? But his 2v2 laning, and I don't think T1 are going to be able to get the leads for pace. So I go Gen G, but ask me if this comes in playoffs, and maybe I change my mind, right? But on current patch, I don't think it's.
The problem is, I actually sort of agree with the way Nymaera did it. Like, if you really believe it's like a pick'em series where they both, then actually the value is in T1 here, I can tell you. The problem is, I sort of agree with Peter. Here's the reason why I actually don't think T1 can win this series personally, is first of all, even though I think Piers is mega, the argument is he could even be the best player in the whole fucking server. He has to, this is the reason why ADCs will forever be salty at fucking solo laners. You just don't get to win League of Legends games if your teammates don't help you for ADC. Like, that world doesn't exist. Like, there's no amount of dancing around a team fight. If you don't get peeled for, by the way, if you don't get ahead in the game to begin with and get your items, like, if you're behind in items, you can't win those fights. So it Piers, unfortunately, I don't think gets to play League of Legends. And then the bigger issue for me is this. I would actually, if this was back at Road to MSI, I would say I'd be fine with T1 being the favourite, because I actually think the area where at that time T1 looked better was in fucking jungle support. That MSI's living rent free in my head. I even saw Carrier play shit games. Holy fuck. Owner had the odd one that was dodgy, but even Carrier played badly. I can't even believe it. So I wish I could say the whole bot lane T1 wins, but I have to see how. So at the moment, I'm just going to side with Gen G. I still think Chovy's mega. I assume Keen will play well. I just think on aggregate they'll be better. Where are you going, Nymaera? Where are you going on this one?
No, I've just twigging on something you're saying there, because Carrier's had a couple of MSIs where he's not performed well, which actually makes me think a future question should be, what are the worst underperformances by legendary players? Because we've talked about similar things, but actually in terms of all-time great players, what are their worst underperformances, which would be very interesting to talk about. I think, look, a T1 are a deeply flawed team. Gen G certainly have some of that too. I think Gen G wins. I'm gonna leave it there. I think Gen G wins. I'm just not sure by how much they're favorites.
Okay.
I think the value's T1. I think Gen G wins. Take the risk involved. Yeah.
I think that's fair. Okay. Now we will move on to my topic. Then at the end, if you're the sub, you can get the Q&A. But my topic is this one. I actually picked it. If you notice, I like to do quite open ones. I actually like to let you guys define it generally. So I just said, is mid lane the most important role in most years of League of Legends or seasons, whatever you want to say, most years? And if so, just I'm assuming it's the general consensus, I feel like most people say it is, but I also want to have that discussion. If you agree it is, then shouldn't all GOAT candidates just be mid laners? Like, in that world, surely people like Deft, whoever you want, surely they don't even get in the convo. If the best role really is mid, surely it's just mid versus mid versus mid. In a bit like, the obvious example would be, I don't care how good you think like Zinedine Zidane is. Most football conversations for GOAT player are just strikers. They're just people who score the goals, and because it's perceived as that's the most important role, and you put your best player there. So is it the most important in most years? Obviously, I also left that open, so if you think there's some years where it wasn't, maybe we can have that discussion. So where do you want to go with this, boys? So and I think it's obvious where I'm sort of biased in the question. I've sort of laid it in there. Yeah,
and so for instance, this is actually a topic which, someone which we've been on shows with before, Kire brings up a fair amount. This is something which he's talked about a fair amount. So I've chatted with him about this, and I've been back and forth on this a little bit too. If it's not mid lane, what other role would it be? I think that's the place you have to start and say, okay, you're talking about most years. I think you can argue that pretty easily. I think anything before 2016 is mid lane, I think anything there. Although I think you can 2011, weird, whatever. 2012, I think it probably is mid lane. 2013, it definitely is. 2014 it is. I think 2013, 2014 are disgustingly strong for mid lane. 2015 probably remains mid lane. Any disagreement on that one? I think so. I think 2016 is the first year it's arguable, because I think the very best mid laner in the world, Faker, can do whatever the fuck he wants. But I think outside of that, I actually think it's top lane or jungle because of the prevalence of teleports and then battle ward jungling. So I think 2016 is the first year against it. So I think it's 4-for-1 at that point in it. 2017, ADC probably, or maybe jungle. It's definitely not.
By the way, since Tracker's Knife exists, you can argue it. Jungle's the other debatable one, right? That was pretty pivotal. And people even forget, even though I don't think he was that insane, that ambition was one of the reasons Samsung won that Worlds.
Oh, he's fantastic. And then you've got players like Score ripping it up too. So that's currently 4-for-2 at that point, discounting season 1 because it's weird, right? 2018, I think that one's a mix-up. I think you can say mid lane. I think you can say jungle. Because again, that's when you have like Scuttle Crab meta. That's when you're permanently skirmishing on Lee Sin, Qiyana, although Qiyana's a mid laner as well. So I think that one you can kind of give a 1-to-1. I think whatever, if you're gonna let's take like the worst possible case scenario for mid lane to see if it gets close. 2019, what do we think about that? Because I think that's a weird
That's
season.
An interesting one.
2019's weird. Because again, mid lanes, you have people like Doomby, have people like Faker, people like Rookie completely tearing it up. But also at that same time, like 2020, 18, 2019, you have a lot of great top laners. A lot of great junglers. I think this one's pretty mixed here. So do you think mid lane's on top still? What do you think?
I mean, we're talking about purely GOAT candidates, right? I think purely
no. Just is it the best role each year?
So this is the power of the role.
Yeah.
Overall.
Or the most important, whatever you think is. I think the same thing, but yeah.
But amongst the top players, I think mid is, because I mean, like mid. So maybe the fourth best mid laner is not better than the fourth best top laner. That's what I kind of mean. But I think
say that again.
So the best mid laner is better than the best top laner. Yeah. But the fourth best mid laner might not even be better than the sixth best.
So it's skewed at the highest level. It skews it a bit, right? Okay.
Exactly, right. So I think it's like 1, 2, 3 mid, and then.
Yeah, because you have like Faker, Doomby, Rookie. You've got BDDs around at that point. No, so is it UCal at that point? I'm trying to remember who the best.
Because I'll give you an example of another way you can think about this. Is pick a different role that you think could be the best role. Yeah. Pick the best players then and contrast them against the mids. Because I'll tell you one of the things that made me think of this topic. It was actually back in 2023 when I used to do all my shows where I would do them with Dom, but also with Monty, with other people. Right? What was amazing was I would do shows where Monty and Dom basically told me they were both equally mind blown by Keria, but then Monty would be like, Keria's the best player in the world, and then Dom would be like, yeah, but Chovy's a mid laner though, so like it's got to be Chovy, hasn't it? Because mid lane has so much agency, it defines the game more. You also can't just 1v9 a game usually as a support. So what I'm also trying to see is if we're going to make another role, like if you want to take the top lane angle, pick your best top lane that year. Let's compare him against the good mids. Let's see who's better.
I suppose another good way to think about it too is also like if you took the best player from each role and took their look, if you thought they are X good at the game, if you applied that to every other role, would they be better or worse?
Yeah.
So if the best mid laner in the game went to a different role, would they have the same impact on the game in that season?
I've got kind of a different approach to answering this question for you. Okay. So the first thing I'll say is that in the early days of the game, I think it's always mid. And why is that? It's because the requirement for minimum level of skill to be able to play a role on like a championship winning team wasn't that high, right? Like you could be a jungler or you could be a support and not actually even have that good mechanics and still be on a championship team, because the baseline for mechanics in those roles you didn't have to be an insane mechanical jungler until like 2021, right? To be even considered to be the best in the role, right? I mean, Bengi being the perfect example, you know? Like, there were times where Bengi was just not mechanically good,
but 2015 it didn't matter, particularly, right? Yeah, exactly, that was, right.
And that tells you for sure the mid was the most important role. Then you have 2017, which is one exception year, which is obviously like just mid lane just didn't matter. You know this because Crown won Worlds, right? Like we've talked about this many times on the show. Like I'm not gonna be more mean to Crown. Okay, so I think if you're gonna make the argument that it's a role that isn't mid, it has to be a player who came up after 2020, 2021, and probably in a role that impacts the map for the entirety of the game. And to me, that is only jungle. So I think the only person, like if you're talking about the entirety of League's history, it has to be mid. But I'm saying you could argue that there is a GOAT player. I would logically, I wouldn't object to it logically if you were say 2021 onwards or 2020 onwards, that the GOAT is a jungler, right? I wouldn't, or a top laner if that's how the meta is.
Yeah, because again, like I guess rattling through the last ones, I think up until 2021, that's when junglers are like peak level of power. 21 and 22, I think you can argue that jungle is the most important role in the game. 23 is actually quite mixed. I actually think there are a lot of very good top laners in 23 because you've got like Zeus coming out into it. Still probably is mid lane because you've got like Knight, Chovy, Faker, like pop obviously Faker later on at that.
If you notice, one problem also, I've been listening to how everyone's describing it compared to my own biases. Another problem you typically have is this. The joke is, if anything, ADC has a better chance on years where the meta really plays to it. Because if you notice, almost every meta that allows carry top laners is also good for mid too. You know what
because
I mean?
everything's good in side lanes, and mid lane is also a side laning role.
Yep.
So there is actually an argument through that saying, actually, is there ever a world in which top lane can become more important than mid lane? I think it'd be harder. I think it can be harder than mid lane because of the way that you can get punished. But I think that, and maybe there are some matchups. I think you can argue that 2015 on average, there were more important top lane champions at Worlds, but then actually across most of the year, because obviously the Juggernaut patch and whatever kind of like ruined stuff for top lane.
And it was when you got all the Fioras and shit like that was coming out, I think, wasn't it? Yeah.
But I think basically throughout going year by year, it is probably mid lane and then jungle is second, probably. And I think everything else, year for year, is like a distant way behind that. So then going on to the rest of your topic is basically, okay, I think we've established here, mid lane is on average the most important role across league history year by year. Second part of it is, do most GOAT candidates have to be from
By the way,
because of that?
Here's even a point I think plays to your point about jungle, which is think of almost any year where the junglers are insane. Those are actually the rare years where you can have the what we call flawed mid laners who have an amazing jungler, like Yagawa and Kanavi, Kuro and Pino. Like you can, as long as you have the superstar jungler, you can have a little bit more scuffed mid and you can still be a contender. Yeah, that's real.
Yeah,
but those are obviously very rare years as well, which is very telling.
Yeah, and I mean, just on the top mid, like, look how much more powerful the top lane quest is than the mid lane quest, and it still doesn't matter. Mid is still more powerful today. You know?
And by the way, the funny thing about this discussion is, even though the joke is, if you ever talk to pro mid laners, they have always, from time immemorial to today, believed that they could play every role, and it's just the other people who play the role. Because essentially, like, it's the same logic as football. They think you just played defender because you weren't good at the game, and see that's why you were support. You know, like even though that case, they don't realize they're sort of saying like, wait a minute, humanoid, you're not better than Kerry, though. It's like, well, it could be. They would believe that, right? But even so, I've always thought the most unfair thing about this discussion actually isn't the real strength of mid lane, no matter what the meta is, it's in the middle of the fucking map. Yes. So if you just roam to the other lane, you automatically can have way outsized impact. Whereas actually, we had a discussion earlier, so it'll tie to that. The only time top lane has that impact is when you have like teleport metas, for example. And even then, sometimes that makes top laner actually the tool of the AD carry. So if anything, the actual setup of the map is also quite key to this discussion, right?
Yep. I agree. And, you know, the only reason why I mentioned the jungle thing is because this is a topic that's I've been, you know, testing in my mind, right? And if I think all time, like, I think it's always mid lane. It's, you know, Faker, Rookie, Knight, you know, all of these players, right?
Yep.
But imagine you're having a discussion about who's the GOAT in the West, right? Like, which is a debate which you see a lot going on, you know? And by that logic, it's always going to be Caps. But, you know, because he's a mid laner, but is there a world where Inspired? What would it take for Inspired to be the GOAT of the West?
Sure.
And is it impossible for him to be the GOAT of the West from jungle? Right? And I was thinking about this. I was thinking, is it impossible for Jankos to be the GOAT of the West from jungle? When he was still playing, when I was in NA, you know, this just a thought experiment was in my mind. And I was thinking, yes, it is. Why is that? It's because Jankos has always been incredibly mechanically proficient, but some of the junglers he was playing against back in 2016, 2017 were just not good. They just didn't have hands, right? Like, and, you know, that gave him a massive advantage that mid laner candidates didn't have.
This is why, though, another problem with this discussion is if we're doing individual players or the role. Because I'll give you an example. Here's the argument. This is just pure like a devil's advocate, like legal argument. If I had to defend that claim, Peter, here's how I would attack it. I would say, but here's the difference, because this isn't actually an argument you'll notice for which role's better. But if you want to do player versus player, here's how you do the Caps versus Jankos one. You say the following: at their absolute peak in the G2 super team, if you had actually have taken out Caps and put in the second best mid, probably would have been Perks, right? If you'd have put him there, you could have had vaguely comparable results. Pick whoever you want as the second best jungler and put him in Jankos' spot. What results are you getting?
Fair.
Which isn't an argument, by the way, because, by the way, the same exact argument, this is why I thought this question was very interesting, because that's why I said important, right? You can argue that in metas where, for example, the support can roam a lot, but it's also very difficult to play support, the support might look like the difference maker. Like, if you have Elisang or Kerry in certain metas, that will be what wins you games. But at the same time, you've also still got to have, like, Faker and Chovy or something like that, you know, or some absurd player, or Caps, or, you know, you've got all... So that's why it's tricky. That's why I think, actually, it was a sort of loaded question. I think surely it probably is mid for most years. But the reason I also made it as well is that's why I added the GOAT part. Because actually, I think in GOAT conversations, people do. Here's the real problem. Because all the mids played Faker, because he played forever, no one can be a GOAT candidate who's a mid laner. That's why, realistically, no fan will let Chovy could win it. By the way, at this point, he doesn't have to just win Worlds. He has to win Worlds while beating Faker. That's all. It's a narrative discussion now. It's not about level of play. But the reason why everyone will let Kerrier there, well, first of all, Kerrier's on the same team as Faker, so they don't play each other. So now you're just watching all the brilliant things Kerrier does and going, yeah, he's fucking dope. And he is. Yep. Or are you looking at Deft and you go, look, they didn't even play each other that often in their careers. They were sort of on different roles. So again, it's almost like we, in the same way as, like this joke is the same person who would say Messi or Ronaldo's better, it doesn't have a problem with Zinedine Zidane being in the conversation because he's totally different. It's safe, isn't it? It's a totally different role. In no way does it mean your GOAT's not as good, and he did a totally different thing in the game. So I think the GOAT discussion is the more interesting one because I do feel like for the GOAT one, people put in a lot of top laners and ADCs and join. I think doesn't every role by now get in the GOAT discussion?
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, top lane's got players. Well, Zeus is making a mighty claim for it, right? Because he's actually had some stuff in there. Obviously, I think the Shy, in terms of his absolute level of peak, is in there. Mid lane's got a dozen. Jungle's a little bit strange because you've got. Well, that's an interesting point. Actually, considering how powerful jungle is, there are, I think, disproportionately less like top 5 to 10 goats.
Isn't that also again though? Isn't that also not about players though? Like I'll put it this way, I'll give you the quick sidebar on this one. In the original StarCraft Brood War, there are 3 races, and because the game wasn't balanced, they just didn't have a patch for 10 years. By default, the Protoss one is the weakest one. It's the hardest to play. So when everyone looks at championships in Korea and they go, a lot of the Protoss players don't have championships. It's like, well, yeah, no shit. They were playing essentially with worse tools. Like you could have been the best player ever. You wouldn't be able to be number 1 from that role. So instead, I would also say, isn't the problem with jungle that the reason why the jungle GOATs aren't as consistent is they do remake their rule almost every single year. Like they might tweak the mid lane meta, boys. They don't change the fucking lane and where the tower is and what healthy. Like that's almost the shit they do with the jungle, with the different jungle tools and the different paths. They even changed all the monsters about 5 times in the fucking history of the game. Like I feel really bad for the junglers because I'm with you. Jungle can have mad impact, but you're right. It actually has a lot on paper. Where's all the crazy GOATs?
But that's why often the conversation comes around like, what is the differential between first and second player in the role? You know, actually, do people view greatest of all time GOAT discussion more important because someone like Canyon was so far ahead of the second person his role in his era?
Aren't we all doing the same thing with Carrier too?
Exactly the same thing we're doing.
Because let's be real, even though it actually makes the case that, let's be real, it just is mid lane. Because here's why. Because you can just go Faker, Chovy, Knight, BDD. The list's insane, isn't it? You could go about 20 names deep on the mid lane. But this is why the discussion is so interesting. The ones that really stand out at jungle or top or fucking support just seem otherworldly, don't they?
But the problem is because of difference in depth in different roles, right? But when we're questioning, is there something about mid that makes it intrinsically better? Then
do you think there is?
Well, I mean, I think there is, but I think that, for instance, if you're talking, that would make every single regional GOAT lean towards a mid laner as well. Which I think is...
Doesn't it in general?
If
I just do this real quick list, doesn't it go Faker, Knight, Maple, Bjergsen, that one's the Sesame Street. Everyone could do that in 1 second flat, right? That's not even the one you have to remember.
Exactly. But I'm saying, is there anyone in a role that is in any position to challenge that GOAT debate, right?
Right.
And there is nobody who isn't a mid laner that I can think of who could do that, with the exception of Inspired. Right? And why is it Inspired? It's because he's a jungler who came into the league after 2021, where his role became more competitive, and it's a role that allowed you to impact the entire map. Right? And
Jojo, the mid laner, left the region.
Sure. Okay. But I'm not making an argument for Jojo. I'm not saying Inspired is the GOAT. I'm saying that in theory, there is a world in the future.
No, here's the thing. I agree with both of you, because I agree with you, Peter. You're right, but it's also because NA is a wasteland of no talent, carried like a motherfucker by EU players. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure,
I'm with you.
Of course.
But the joke is they're even carried by like a fucking player from like where isn't George Ediodo? Where's he from? Is it Mexico?
Mexico.
Argentina? Was it Mexico? Which one is it? I believe it was.
Sorry.
Am I wrong? Is it not Mexico?
No, it's absence. What's the name? He's Argentinian. He's the Argentinian.
There you go.
Okay,
I mean, the joke is he's one of the absolute best LCS players now, which isn't even a diss against him. It's more like the region just doesn't have a lot of, especially NA talent. It's almost non-existent, is it? I mean, it was Jojo and Busio they left. And then Busio even did the joke where, fair play to him, he doesn't really mean this, spoiler, he doesn't speak Polish, but he did that, hey, I'm actually Polish when I came to you. And that's just banter, by the way. That's just a fucking funny angle. That even made me know he'll fit in. Like, he already understands, like, how to shit talk properly, you know. But I've heard he doesn't speak any Polish, so he's not in that sense. He's just ethnically, you know.
Yep.
Okay, I think that was a pretty good discussion. Like I said,
yeah, I like that a lot.
Even though, like, if you notice, it's not really about, can you answer the question quickly? It's more, is it fun to keep digging? Because on that one, you can just go anywhere with that one, can't you? Okay, we've got another one for you, which is I've got another poly market for you. So since I did the Gen GT one, which obviously you think of the last like month, every week would be changing your angle on that one. I think this one has become way spicier. How about the winner of the LPL? If you don't know, ladies and gentlemen, at the time of recording, we still don't even 100% know the roster of BLG. In theory, it's actually going to be, so far, you know, breaking news on the tracker. On the tracker, we believe, I'm hearing words that Bin and Knight have made up, and Bin will be coming back to the lineup. But then that's just because Wenbo was one of those examples that I'll never understand about the LPL. LPL, deepest region ever for every role, but whenever someone has to either be replaced or a sub comes in, you know, in LCK, you bring in a replacement or a sub in LCK, that becomes like a Hall of Famer. In the LPL, you'll be like, how's this guy even in the LPL? Like, that's what makes no sense. So, because I actually genuinely believe, gentlemen, that if there already had have been a good replacement, Bin never plays for BLG ever again. But I think Wenbo did actually suck so much that Knight was like, you know what? Looked himself in the mirror and he goes, do I really want to win that world? Because you know what? At the end of the day, maybe I have to just let this guy talk shit, or like my whole family or whatever it is we have to do. Maybe that's worth it. You know what, Bin? You're not that bad, son. Because the other drama was maybe the rumour was maybe they get 369 from TS on the bench. Maybe they get Flandre. He's just been removed from anyone's legend. Apparently, maybe he asked for too much money. By the way, the reason I say all the time recording is, for all I know, when the VOD comes out, maybe this has changed. Maybe Bin isn't in the lineup. Maybe Flandre doesn't. Who knows at this point? The LPL's beautiful like that. It's like the back page of the football fucking transfers. Anything could be real. Nothing could be real. Who the fuck knows till someone signs? So, obviously, though, it's made it a lot more interesting because beforehand, as you can see, obviously, yeah, there's a fuck ton of money went in on BLG. By the way, that's also because this went all the way back to last year. So, understandably, at their peak, yeah, there's a massive, about 56%. Problem is, I don't know that many people who are that confident now. So, gentlemen, who wins and what's the best value angle?
So, I would have said, if you'd given me these numbers immediately after MSI, I would have said that top actually looked like quite decent value, but then top have gone and nuked themselves. So I think,
yeah.
like, I mean, you know, they did badly internationally again, but they are always a threat domestically, but they are not in that list, right? So is that fair? Sorry, you're the resident LPL watcher.
Yeah, sorry, apologies there, I had an internet issue just as we asked it, getting towards the end of that question. I think realistically, yeah, BLG are favourites. It's just a question of, again, much like in a lot of these segments, does it match up to the numbers? I don't think anyone's legend are beating BLG. I mean, they lost a series against them this week where Shum was on some of the worst form he's had this year. Yep. He's definitely going to get better than that. I think this guy absolutely...
That was with the Joker top laner, yeah, absolutely.
And with Wenbo against, you know, I mean, AL were also integrating Breathe as well, so they were also integrating a new top laner. There's a delta there that both could maybe work towards. Tarzan is really good. Maybe he can beat Shun heavily enough where they can get some inroads. I don't think they beat them consistently. Sure, they're a contender, but I don't think you can favor them. Top esports, I mean, Draw's not bad. I don't like what they've done with Fengyue. I'd imagine top esports are still largely going to be the same team, which means that they're probably largely just going to lose to BLG again. JDG... that team somehow keeps getting worse in terms... They've been ill this week. So in terms of recent information, JDG look worse than they should be. Dare I say it, or maybe it's just because of Thorin's presence, I actually think IG don't look bad. I think IG don't actually look bad.
Listen, you get credit. If at 6% they win, you will get absurd value. I'll give you that.
Look, I think in terms of people I think are going to overperform expectations, it's IG. Yeah, I think IG will actually do really well because they actually have an actual freaking roster this split. I think the problem
and
is...
here's where you're not even being a ridiculous homer. Let's be real. If you were if you're an international only watching fan, just tune out. You know what you're talking about in this section. If you only watch the LPL, actually, if there were ever two players could just walk into a split after not playing and be decent, it is Shy and Rookie. Like, they've just shown it through their careers. Like, they can do it with any teammates even. So, actually, yeah, that roster, people are probably sleeping on that roster, actually, mate. It's actually, it's much better than the past year's one, in my opinion.
Like, they have a game one curse. I think that I'm interested to see how Mako plays the rest of this meta. The first game of the series they played this week wasn't great. Wei is a volatile jungler. He's very streaky, very good and then very bad. That can definitely hurt them. Because, I mean, look, last summer, with a very similar roster, it was basically just with Gala instead of Assume.
Yeah.
They were top tier in regular season. And then playoffs hit, and then they weren't great in playoffs. Things went wrong for them there, and they had to make their way through regionals. It sucks. I mean, I think they were actually much better than people remember them. It's just the playoffs into regionals was a bit of a fright for them.
And speaking of interviews, blue balls and everything, thanks to T1 for having to come out and tell us that they really challenged you and that was really hard and you thought you could lose. Don't say that. Just let me believe they died already. Why are you telling me that? Why are you telling me that? Why fuck with me like that?
I looked at that series and I'm like, that was oddly winnable, and hurts me more. It hurts me more.
It was.
Realistically, I can't say anyone at BLG are favored. The question is whether you accept the risk of numbers versus numbers. Yeah, BLG are not going to be as dominant. Probably, well, they're not going to be as dominant as they are in the previous splits because of all this stuff. Probably, they might end up, getting back with Bin and things will be fine, but they'll have to work back some bits of their form.
Well, actually, that's another question, isn't it? Look, I'm just assuming that at the end they have to just get back with Bin. Surely both parties aren't stupid enough to just throw away the rest of the year.
I've seen that Flandra might be there. I've seen that.
Listen, I'm with you. Stuff. But obviously, the real question is this, Nymaera. If they really did just use Wenbo from here on out and you act like the roster's locked, could they still win? Would they still win the LPL? Because I feel like it's possible, right? It's not impossible.
Unironically, I'd still favour them because they still have Knight shirted on, and Viper in the mage meta.
If you want value though, and Wenbo is there, like the long shot that I would go for. So if Bin is there, there's zero chance of this happening, right? But if Bin is not there, World Elite at 3%.
I mean, that is a long shot, though, isn't it? To win the whole LPL. Here's the problem, Peter. Peter, I'll remind you of last week's episode. It is a double elim tournament, bro. That's the problem. You know what? If it was a single elim, it's not impossible they could miracle run it. The issue is, you're probably going to have to beat BLG twice, though, to do it. You know what I mean? So, listen, I think Monkey's a demon, but can he win 6 out of, 10 games? Like, are you asking a lot there, mate? Like, that's a lot you're asking,
I think it's worse than to face top esports than BLG. I think BLG, I mean, they actually have a positive game record versus them from last playoffs. 3-1, then losing 2-3. They're +1 in the aggregate there, They win on aggregate. But top esports just seems to be a team that they can't get ahead of. Yeah. I don't think W can do it because they just have to run into a team that they can't beat, I think. Just a team that can just hands check them and TN goes to town on them. I mean, they beat anyone's Legend last playoff, so I suppose they're a beatable team. I mean, W actually have a shot if the bracket works out in a very favorable way, but you're not wrong to bring them up, Peter. Put it that way.
I mean, basically at 3%, like it's you want a long shot for value. 3% on them, 6% on IG is where you're getting your value, or you go the safe route, in my opinion.
By the way, in light of the conversation we had on this show, the real problem if you're not an LPL watcher is the BLG real roster was just conceivably so far ahead in so many dimensions. They were hard carrying the region, and it's not even that the others are bad. It's that it's more like if you go top 5, top 6, it's not a bad level, but the amount that can actually win isn't that good. Because I'm actually with you, Nymaera. You know what? This is the obvious edgy take. I think even if they play Wembley, they'll win the LPL. I just don't think they go in Worlds then, unfortunately. But I actually still think the rest of the team is so fucking strong. Like, mate, Knight just looks like he plays that way no matter who's in the server. Jun and On are unbelievable right now. That's also why I feel like if you're being, come on, mate, drink a cup of coffee and apologise. You know what I mean? Fucking wake up. Like, this is just bad for everyone. Like, no one wins in this scenario. Literally no one.
Childish,
BLG loses and Bin loses. It's just bad for everyone in it. Like, you got to swallow your pride. Because the other reason this one sucks is we're doing it about the LPL. Bro, this is a chance to win Worlds. For real.
Yep.
This is a chance to win the World Championship.
Yeah, I get that. I feel like they also threw away MSI as well. They definitely didn't play as well as they could have done in finals. And I'm not saying that HLE weren't a good team, and I'm not saying that they didn't play well. BLG could have played better in finals, and in such a close series, they probably walk away from that. We definitely saw it in the upper bracket. You can argue Bright Slight Merchants, maybe they just can't deal with the pressure. We've seen that from Shin'an before. There's a reason why BLG have not. They've won one international tournament, and it was first time, which is the least pressure of them. But yeah, I mean that's what you're talking about with this team. Like they should be on a golden road opportunity, really.
Yeah. When did this alleged dispute happen? Was it
post MSI and EWC?
Oh, after MSI, not between upper and lower bracket, like in.
No, I'm pretty sure it happened like post MSI. Or
although, by the way, this isn't mentioned, but I do assume that's part of it. Like since you could argue Bin himself was the one who got humiliated by the way they lost MSI, so you could argue in that moment it almost looks like he had a diva and blamed someone else, and then they had a bunch of drama stuff that we won't go into. It's more for the other talk shows, but just some stupid. The worst part of it all, by the way, is it all just seems outside of the server bullshit, which is why I hate the most. The reason to break a team up is you can't play with the guy, not the guy upset my feelings or something. Like, come on, break. We're trying to win worlds. Worlds, guys.
Ben's got a bit of a history with this now, doesn't he? Because he's had. I saw someone breaking it down. He's had something like 3 or 4 incidents like this where obviously he had the one earlier this year where he apparently walked out the training facility and they had to Danny had to go and grab him basically and get him back in line.
But you know what? That's also, though, to be fair on the other side, why also I don't necessarily blame BLG. If people do that, where essentially they sort of hold you hostage and they're a star player, eventually you get sick of it and you go, you know what, fucking walk then. If you want to go, let's move past you already and get to the next guy. That's happened to many guys in history.
Funnily enough, I was watching a podcast or something else clips from it, where Steven Gerrard talking about the golden generation of England is saying, wow, we were really not a team, were we? And looking back at that, you can have all the money, all the great results in the world. You actually have to be a team at some point too, Not that BLG haven't been that before. I think they've actually... I think losing in high-pressure matches sucks. And I'm sure for young people who are very competitive, especially someone who's so outwardly egotistical like Bin2, that's going to tank your ego, isn't it? That's going
Put it this way, the reason why it works like that is because the opposite is true as well. If you ever win really high pressure big matches and upsets and things like that, that bonds players in a way where sometimes they stay with that teammate for too many years. Maybe he sucks already, but in their mind, he can get back there. He can get. It's why so many orgs have gambled on Perks as a player when he wasn't as good at the end. Like, what if he can recreate the magic? You remember the highs. So no, I'm with you. I also do think the joke of this all is if they win MSI, no, this is even happening, is it? No one's having any drama and fucking each other. You're just all still playing. So actually, if anything, that's the biggest victory of HLA. They parlayed it in the fucking winning worlds as well. Cool. Cheers. Anyway, that will, for you on YouTube, be the end of the episode. But if you are a subscriber, we will now do a little exclusive Q&A.
You can support us financially.
Also pick us.
Doing this.
Yeah, pick Shop and Scale in the subscriber thing.